We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and the ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my young Padawan, Andrew Williams. How are we doing, Andrew?
I'm fine.
Good. That's good to hear. Very big episode today. Very special episode today. We're kicking off a brand new theme for the month. And to help us, we are going to be joined by a very special guest, Mr. Brian Keese of the Draft Punks podcast and Discord server is here. He's actually waiting in the other room. He's being gracious enough to let us record this intro. But he will be breaking down this movie and just his general love of Star Wars, which I know runs very deep. So I'm very excited to have him on here. I think... I don't know. That's it. You should say something about Brian. Very excited to have him on.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm glad that we've got somebody that can share their love of this film with us. Bit of an interesting film. Got a bit of an interesting legacy, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But I'm excited to have a true diehard along for the ride with us.
That being said, Andrew, no time for fun banter up top. We got to get right to it. We got a big episode because every week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It is Star Wars prequel month, and this week we are talking the 1999 film Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Andrew, we have got to talk about Star Wars previously on our podcast. We covered The Rise of Skywalker, and Star Wars is just a massive thing. I'm sure we found ways to talk about it in other episodes as well. I think I know your general history with the franchise, but how about your history with this movie specifically? Did you see it in theaters?
5 times.
5 times?
5 times.
Holy, in its initial run or like in your life?
5 times. 5 times in the initial run.
Who is the biggest Star Wars fan in your family?
Probably
Like, who's
my mom,
the reason?
actually.
Is she the reason you saw it 5 times? I guess that's what I want to know.
That was
like,
my dad.
Okay.
My dad just kept taking us to see it. So this is kind of built up because in the mid to late 90s, they re-released all the original films, the special editions, all went to theaters. So we saw all of those. So I was kind of primed for this. Like, and they released those in orders. Like, it was episode 4, then episode 5, then episode 6. And my dad, I remember we had to go all over town to find places showing them because we would go to one place and they were like, we don't have that because it's, there was something about the presentation of the audio they couldn't do. So we ended up going to a lot of different places. But we saw all 3 of the original films on the big screen through the special editions. And so when episode 1 was getting primed, everybody was pretty hyped. My dad there were people I remember we would go and see friends and be like, oh yeah, I saw it 3rd time this weekend. And we just kept going. So my weekend came, my dad would be like, you guys want to see Star Wars? And I'd be like, okay. So I saw Star Wars 5 times. Episode 1
That's
5
awesome.
times. I don't believe we saw any of the sequels that many times. I don't know anything. The only thing I ever did that came close to that is I saw Force Awakens twice the day it opened. Yeah, so I was there when this movie came out, and I was there many more times, so 5 times.
I think The Dark Knight is my record. I think I saw that 4 times, including twice. Well, I saw it like the midnight, and then I went to sleep and woke up and went and saw it again. I know I saw it at least once in IMAX, but I definitely, I don't know if I hit 5 though. So that's pretty impressive. What is your Star Wars fandom, like, for you personally, like in 1999 going into this? I mean, going to see all the special editions, were you yourself
that
hyped?
definitely increased the hype. That definitely made people more excited. It was definitely a popular thing at school. Like, you know, I had friends that were like, man, Star Wars, like they were getting toys and stuff like that. I never really had any Star Wars toys. That wasn't really wasn't really my jam. I was more of a Batman, Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers guy. Ghostbusters to a lesser extent by that point. But no, so definitely at school, Star Wars was kind of in a resurgence where people were pretty amped. And yeah, you know, you talk about nerd culture kind of getting its resurgence. I think Star Wars and the prequel trilogy is another big moment where, like, you know, it was, I mean, this movie coming out was a huge deal. Like, because the re-releases of the originals were one thing, but, like, you know, people were lining up. You know, this was before the days of reserved seating for movies. You were lining up hours ahead of time to get in. If you wanted to get a good seat before a movie, you get there 30 to 45 minutes ahead of time just to make sure that you weren't sitting in the edges. And now I just, you know, book it online 2 days beforehand. Like, I've already got tickets bought for movies in my app that I'm just like, all right, don't got to worry about that one. But actually, no, I might be out of those right now because I finally saw Venom. But yeah, so it was a pretty insane hype. I mean, people were going crazy, and I was part of it. I was there.
I definitely saw this in theaters one time. I don't even know, it was maybe opening weekend. I couldn't even tell you, but I do remember seeing it in theaters. As far as my Star Wars fandom, before this, I had seen the original trilogy. My dad had a VHS box set, and again, I've shared this before, but I remember being in second grade and being like, you know, I should watch Star Wars. Like, it's just such a big thing. It's all these references. I should know where these references are coming from. And so I just watched one movie a night, 3 days in a row, and I was like, okay, cool. I get Star Wars now. I get these references. I didn't turn me into like a huge fan. I liked them, and it gave me a thing to talk with my dad about. We can now talk about Star Wars, but that was kind of it. After that, I did not go back to theaters to see the special editions, but what kept Star Wars alive in my brain was a few toys. I had a very big Millennium Falcon. It was pretty, one of my favorite toys ever. Like, it was very large. I'm holding my hands up so Andrew can see. And it opened up like the the two like forks at the front of the Millennium Falcon. Those were hinges. You could open it up at the back, and it flips open into a play set. Like, it even had the little like game board, the chess like game that they play. I'm sure there's an actual name for it. Don't crucify me, fans. It was very cool. I think I had Luke's speeder from Tatooine, a few other things, and that was like, you know, what kept Star Wars in my brain. And then I see Episode 1. I'm sure I liked it enough as a kid, but honestly, had you asked me before how many times I'd seen Episode 1, I probably would have said, like, you know, a few times. But rewatching it this week, Andrew, I think this is the first time I've watched this movie since theaters. Wow. No joke. Like I've seen scenes and, of course, memes and stuff before, and so I guess I just felt like I had seen it multiple times. But so many scenes, especially the big scenes of this movie, I was just reminded of seeing it in theaters and my thoughts of it at the time, and I don't think I ever revisit it, just not being the biggest Star Wars fan. So this was quite an experience to kind of go back to this after, you know, this movie's legacy. We'll talk about it. That's most of what kept this movie alive in my brain, was just the discussion around it. So actually watching it again this week was quite an experience. We're going to talk about it. We're going to break it down. But first, let's set the stage here. This movie is originally released May 16th of 1999. What a year for movies. Like, seriously, 99 is just crazy. It's made on a budget of $115 million at the box office. In 1999, it brings in $924 million. That is crazy. This is before the times that blockbusters regularly broke $1 billion. That is a lot of money. That's more than like the first Spider-Man a few years later. That is nuts. Critically, audiences are split on this one. It holds a 52% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Has a 59% audience score, just slightly higher than the critics. But to this day, this movie is divisive at best when it comes time to talking about the actual quality of the film.
Yeah, this is a movie that I think it's undeniable that there was a lot of hype when it came out, and obviously the box office speaks for itself, but it is definitely a movie that has sat in a very weird space within the fandom. There has been some reevaluation of it. There are those who will now, they view it, you know, as that the Star Wars they grew up on, basically, and so there has been kind of a reevaluation, a kind of resurgence to a degree. Some of this driven by people that maybe weren't as happy with the sequels when they look back at these, kind of as at least a uniform idea. There's a bunch of different motivations and reasonings for that, but even now to this day, you can't really deny that this movie has it will be nice and call it a complicated place within the fandom.
Taking a look at the creative team, very simple. This movie's written and directed by one George Lucas.
Not familiar.
The most involved he's been in a Star Wars film since not just the original trilogy, but since A New Hope, or Star Wars as it was called, which even then there are other voices, other collaborators that are absent here. This is the most singular Star Wars vision we have seen from him, which I think a lot of people maybe don't realize or forget. But, he doesn't direct Empire Strikes Back. He doesn't direct Return of the Jedi. And there's, again, other story input, writing input. His wife is heavily involved creatively. Like, a lot of stuff that's not here. Like, this is just pure, unadulterated George Lucas Star Wars for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, even looking at Empire Strikes Back, you have a George Lucas story credit, but that's it. It's written by Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan and directed by Irvin Kershner. He does get back to a co-writing credit on Return of the Jedi, and that's ultimately directed by Richard Marquand and also, again, co-written by Lawrence Kasdan. And Return of the Jedi was another one that Steven Spielberg was considered for it. David Lynch was considered for it. David Lynch just told the story about going out to meet George Lucas and talking about it, which feels so strange. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that. David Lynch just told the story, and he's like, I had a migraine the whole time, and he's showing me all this stuff. Like, David Lynch just seems baffled by Return of the Jedi, which is so weird to hear him say. And David Cronenberg directing a Star Wars also feels so strange. Like, just such a weird thing for him to do at that point. But also,
I would love to see the aliens we meet in a David Cronenberg Star Wars movie.
But at the same time, the fact that he's seeking out such a weird variety of people, like, I think that's kind of cool. Like, I thought that was a super interesting thing because, at what the Dune hasn't come out yet, so I don't know why you're thinking David Lynch, or even Cronenberg, but it's really, really cool. And even episode 1 here, I think it was a little bit more recently, I think when they're gearing up for Solo, Ron Howard said that, himself, Robert Zemeckis, and Steven Spielberg were all approached for Phantom Menace. But even David Lynch and those guys all kind of had the same idea where they were like, George, this is your thing. Like, why don't you want to do it? Like, and ultimately, he doesn't direct Return of the Jedi, but he does direct these. I read a weird story that Steven Spielberg actually sort of directed some scenes for one of the prequels. We'll talk a little bit more about that down the line when we get to the movie he did that for. But apparently, George Lucas really tried to get Steven Spielberg to do a Star Wars movie. He really tried to make it happen, but Spielberg didn't quite get there. Did obviously do 4 Indiana Jones movies, so that's not nothing. But
George
yeah, so
Lucas has such a fascinating career because obviously in my whole life and to everyone, he's the Star Wars guy. He's the creator of Star Wars, and that's about it. Like he's got, maybe like he's got like some influence and he's part of the Indiana Jones original movies, but it's just all about Star Wars once Star Wars hits. But then you get a little older, get a little more into films, and you hear about this movie American Graffiti that he did, and it's like a fantastic slice of life American film that is very highly regarded, and that was like a promising start for this guy that's in this new batch of filmmakers, coming out of like the 70s auteurs. You move into this new crop with
like that,
with Steven Spielberg or Joe Dante and George Lucas right there. And like, these are, like his peers. And it feels like you jump forward a few decades, everyone of his peers is dying for him to direct and do more stuff. And people want George Lucas to do more directing. What am I trying to say? People want George Lucas to direct movies more than George Lucas wants to direct movies. It seems like he doesn't want to do the on-set day-to-day. I'm not calling him lazy. I'm just saying like that aspect of filmmaking, he seems like naturally gifted at, but is constantly trying to pass it off to someone else, and everyone else is like, "You're good at this. Do it. Direct Star Wars if you want. Direct other stuff. Like, we want to see you as a filmmaker."
It is very odd because he's definitely somebody that, like, you know, he even said once, it was an interview, I think when Red Tails was coming out, which is a movie he kind of produced, and he said, in a best case scenario, I can get Steven Spielberg to direct my movie. In a worst case scenario, I can do it myself. So George Lucas sees himself directing what he wants to see as the worst case scenario. It's like he's the last option, basically. And it's a wild career. It really, really is when you look at it. Because, like, this man has directed 6 movies. That's it.
Insane.
He has directed 6 movies. 4 of them are Star Wars. In fact, the last 4 are Star Wars. Which is weird to say since one of the last 4 was in 1977. But then he did American Graffiti and THX 1138, which is a kind of weird science fiction film that he wrote, and actually Francis Ford Coppola produced based off a short film that he did. It is a interesting thing because it means that American Graffiti is like the exception in his filmography. It's the one movie he makes that's not like science fiction, and again, one of only 2 that's not Star Wars. But when that's such a strange metric. Is like he has directed 6 feature films in his life. He has done some short films and stuff, and a lot of those are in the late 60s when he's cutting his teeth. But yeah, like the fact that it's after American Graffiti that he goes and makes Star Wars is kind of insane. Like, the swing he takes on that, and the fact that it works and becomes what it is nothing short of Herculean. And I mean, the money he's made off of stuff, the man certainly doesn't have to do anything, but it is, you look at his filmography of only 6 directed movies, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know that this guy likes directing very much. Certainly doesn't do it. He certainly could have done it more, and he basically chose not to.
Today, we're talking about one of those 6 directorial efforts. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It's time to break down this movie and everything we like about it with our special guest. Are you ready?
Yeah.
When the Galactic Trade Federation sets up a blockade around the planet of Naboo, the Galactic Federation sends Jedi Knight Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi to meet and reason with the Federation trade leader. But when the trade leaders are ordered by a mysterious Sith Lord to dispose of the Jedi warriors, they flee to the surface and rescue Queen Amidala from the surface civilization, as well as Jar Jar Binks from the planet's underwater civilization. After escaping from the planet and blockade, they stop on Tatooine in need of critical repairs to their ship. Qui-Gon meets a young Anakin Skywalker who is both gifted with machines and midichlorians, the microscopic bacteria in our cells that communicate with the Force. After freeing Anakin from slavery, the heroes attempt to plead with the Galactic Federation Senate to aid the planet of Naboo as the Trade Federation's droid army invades, but no immediate aid is granted. Queen Amidala requests a new leader be appointed, and Senator Palpatine of Naboo is appointed, yet is still unable to send support to the planet. Therefore, Queen Amidala, Anakin, Jar Jar, and the Jedi return to Naboo to face the invading forces on their own. But the Sith apprentice, Darth Maul, is awaiting their arrival. There we go. I got it all. I think I covered the main plot
Nailed
points.
it.
There's still
First try.
It's super easy.
Impressive.
I pronounced everything correctly the first time, and you were all impressed with my Star Wars vernacular. Brian, I'll tell people who you are in a second, but you told me before I read this synopsis, like, I don't know why it's such a long synopsis. Very little happened. It's a very simple movie. Was that sarcasm? Did I add stuff in here that shouldn't be? Because to me, that's a lot of twists and turns, and I still feel like I cut stuff out.
No, I think you included everything. I just don't, I don't know. I don't think it's a ton going on. It's, there's a trade dispute and we move kind of back and forth between Tatooine and Coruscant quite a bit, with a little bit of Naboo. But, yeah, I don't know. I feel like compared to, and I guess A New Hope is kind of similar. There's not a ton that really happens in A New Hope to me either when you go and dissect it. But I feel like the plot line here is fairly simple. Trade Federation laws aside, everyone's favorite thing about Star Wars is political trade disputes. So
yeah, bureaucracy and how slow government can move in action and when it's too comfortable. Yeah, all the usual Star Wars sci-fi fantasy stuff that we think of. But look, we're here to talk about the positives, everything we like about this film, and we're going to do that. But first, as I said, we got to tell people who this extra voice in the studio is. Brian, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. You are now officially, we recognize you as I was trying to do a Star Wars quote. I don't know them off the top of my head. I'm not good about this. Let's see. We recognize your ability to speak on our podcast, but do not grant you the rank of friend of the show. How's that? Is that a good one?
It's outrageous. It's outrageous.
Welcome to the show.
I demand an investigation.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I'm excited to be here on this Bombad podcast. This is fun. I talked with Chris about this probably a month or so ago, and you asked me if I would join you for one of these, and I said, yeah, I love episode 1. It's my favorite of the prequels. And you said episode 1 is your favorite of the prequels? You absolutely have to come on for that one. So I think the general consensus is that 3 is a better movie. But I just, I love this film. If I'm going to watch one prequel film, it's going to be episode 1.
This is very interesting to me. Yes. So, Brian, first off, big fan of your podcast, Draft Punks, and the community that now, orbits around that original podcast. I knew you were a big Star Wars fan, which, of course, is why I reached out. We had Star Wars month coming up, prequel month. And, yeah, I would not have guessed. I guess I'm not surprised you picked episode 1. I'm more surprised that you say emphatically it's your favorite. I did not know. I don't know. You're more in Star Wars fandom than I am. Do you think that's a hot take?
I think it's a semi-hot take. I think everyone's pretty much in agreement that 2 hashtag positivity podcast 2 has the most flaws. But I think there's probably a 60-40, maybe 70-30 split between episodes 3 and 1. Yeah, when you reached out to me, you said, so you're a big fan of Star Wars, huh? I just assumed that was a thing people knew because of how much we talk about it on the Draft Punk server. So I thought it was like a bit from you before you asked me if I would be on your show. I was like, is that a line from like the scene in Clerks or something where they talk about the Death Star? I didn't know what you were going for, but then you very graciously invited me to come on and join you guys for this episode. So yeah, very excited. And you mentioned Draft Punk's community. I'll just talk about it for a second. We have not done a podcast in a long time, mainly because I now have a child, and one of my other co-hosts also has a child, and that has made recording and finding recording times very difficult. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a few Star Wars themed episodes where we drafted our favorite characters, favorite scenes, things like that. And like you said, we've built up this big Discord community that even though we don't record, super friendly. People come in and talk about their favorite movies, video games, TV shows, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, which is how, you and I kind of connected and met. And so super happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. My most recent watch through of the entire Star Wars saga was to do the machete cut, the machete order, or whatever you want to call it, which I know has some traction and is a popular way to watch these movies. And the most significant thing that does is cut out episode 1. You just don't watch episode 1, which, so I haven't, I think this is my first time watching the movie beginning to end since theaters, legitimately. I know I've seen scenes and parts of it.
Wow.
But I don't think I've sat down and watched it because, like I said, when I did that big rewatch, I just skipped over it.
I can't help but be a little pedantic about the term rewatch then, because you're clearly not rewatching all of them if you're skipping a whole movie.
I don't know. What do you call it then? My Star Wars watch. I don't know. I don't know. Andrew,
Just wanted to make you feel bad.
Well, you've succeeded. All right, we're going to jump into the scenes, but first things first, guys. We got to talk about this cast, starting with the high point, best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, we're going to start with you. Who is receiving your Mark Strong Award for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom... It bugs me to no end how these Star Wars movies are titled. You got the original trilogy, which I know the first one was just Star Wars, and then retroactively becomes Star Wars A New Hope. But it's Star Wars subtitle. No numbering until you see the opening scroll, officially. And then you get to the prequels, and episodes are just right there in the title. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So when you lay them all out, you've got Episode 1, 2, and 3, and then no episodes beyond that. Does that bother anybody else?
No.
Just me. Andrew, who's getting your Mark Strong Award?
On a base level, I understand, because technically it would literally be like Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Star Wars Episode 2, The Clone Wars, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Then it would be Star Wars. Then it would be Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, and then Star Wars Return of the Jedi, and then Star Wars The Force Awakens.
What did they do with the sequels?
I don't think the sequels have the episode titles either.
They
I
do
don't
not.
think they do.
No.
Like they have them, and again, they're in the scrolls, but they're not in the titles. So it's like Star Wars.
Only the
Force
prequel puts it like in the official title of the movie.
Can I ask, do you prefer the sequel trilogy or the prequel trilogy?
Oh, we don't rank things on this podcast.
All right, but
it's the sequel trilogy.
For me,
I don't know. Actually, that's actually a very.
I actually don't know, because we've spoken. I think we may have a whole episode on The Last Jedi. It's actually no way to find out.
The Rise of Skywalker, we have a full episode.
Yeah, Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
we should
because
have
Last Jedi is immaculate.
Well,
Last Jedi,
podcast.
we've talked about it enough that you could probably edit together various episodes into a Last Jedi episode.
So we both love Last Jedi, and I would say that Last Jedi is probably, when you're going beyond the original films and even including some of the original films, I like Last Jedi the most. But I also probably enjoy Rise of Skywalker the least. So it's tough to say what's the one I prefer, because one has the movie I love the most, but also the movie I kind of enjoy the least. Or one of the ones I enjoy the least. So it's a very strange thing to really kind of quantify which is better. I know we'll talk about it more as we go on, but like it's actually genuinely tough to say, because the prequel trilogy has definitely gotten its general reevaluation, it feels like, in the wake of the sequel trilogy and just general nostalgia, but I couldn't tell you.
My instinct was to say the sequel trilogy because The Last Jedi is my favorite, but like, does having the one single entry make the entire trilogy my favorite? I don't know, and honestly, given that I just said a few minutes ago, this is my first time watching this in theaters, I'll come back to you at the end of the month. I'm going to rewatching the entire prequel trilogy. I've seen the sequels multiple times. This is my first time reevaluating the prequel trilogy. So as a whole, as a 3-movie structure, I'll answer that at the end of the month. It's a pretty good question.
Well, thank you. I try. I for my part, I would say that I agree with Andrew. I think Rise of Skywalker is probably the weakest of the 6 movies, though I would put it pretty close to Attack of the Clones. And then if you just give me 7 and 8 versus 1 and 3, I think I would take the sequel trilogy in that matchup. So for me, it's probably the sequel trilogy. But we have our friend Matt O'Ray on the Draft Punk server, and he and I talk Star Wars a bunch, and our opinion is just like, we just like Star Wars. It's just fun.
How dare you?
Yeah, and that's what's
come into
made
this internet in 2024, the year of our Lord, and enjoy things. How the nerve you have!
I'm so sorry, but the fandom, it makes it as tough as possible to love Star Wars. But I've never like sat down and watched one and just been like, oh yeah, I just hate that. Like I'll talk about problems with Attack of the Clones if you want me to, and #positivity podcast. We're not here to do that. We're not even here to talk about that movie. But I still enjoy it. I wouldn't skip it on a rewatch like some people might.
Brian, Andrew and I have already talked about our history kind of with Star Wars and this movie specifically, but what about you? So aside from just this being your favorite of the prequels, do you have a particular attachment to this one? Like, what made you choose this one? What's your history with episode 1? Is something you saw in theaters, have a lot of strong nostalgia with?
Yeah, so growing up, it was my mom who was a huge Star Wars fan, and she got me into it when I was, 6, 7, 8 years old, just like perfect age for it. I went as Darth Vader for Halloween a couple times, as one does.
Yeah.
And then this movie drops in May of 1999, right before my 12th birthday. Like, I was the prime age to just absolutely love this film. Everything included that we're going to talk about, I'm sure, from pod racing to Jar Jar Binks to Darth Maul. Like, and there were just so many moments in that film where watching it, I'm just like, this is incredible. This is my Star Wars. Like this, we get this new film so many years, 16 years after Return of the Jedi came out. We didn't think there was ever going to be new Star Wars content. And, to just have this kind of popped into my life all of a sudden was just like magical. So yeah, I vividly remember seeing this in theaters multiple times when it came out, and then when it was re-released a couple of times. So, it's just right place, right time for me.
Got it. So you're already a big Star Wars fan, and then this is delivered. It's not like what made you a Star Wars fan. It's just you were already like primed and ready to.
Correct. Yeah, I was a huge Star Wars fan before this movie came out.
Andrew, like 30 minutes ago, I asked you who your Mark Strong Award winner is,
Yeah.
so you can now go ahead and answer that.
I'm going to be going straight to the top. I will be going with Liam Neeson as Ki Kwan Jin. Sorry, I pronounced it like quinoa. Sorry.
You fool!
It is Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson. I'll be going straight to the top. I don't know if I'd call him the star of this movie, but he definitely feels like he's probably the most front and center character, at least for our first half here.
Definitely on the poster.
He's most prominent on the poster, yes, outside the giant Darth Maul face behind him. A character so notable, he's voiced by somebody other than the guy who plays him. Chris, if I had a nickel for every movie in the last 2 weeks that we've covered that had a villain voiced by somebody else that's not the actor playing the villain, I'd have 2 nickels.
And if you had a
Not a
nickel
lot.
for every Star Wars villain that's voiced by someone other than the actor, you would have also 2 nickels?
At least.
Maybe more?
Anyway, we'll talk about that more in a minute. But anyway, I remember one of the myriad times I saw this movie as a kid. Qui-Gon Jinn was just cool. Like I thought he was just a cool character. This kind of fully formed Jedi, kind of like Obi-Wan in the original films, but younger, more capable, gets to do all the cool Jedi fight stuff. And Liam Neeson's like he's the cream of the crop. And he's got this elder statesman role that he's kind of taking on, kind of meant to be kind of the adult in the room in a lot of ways, with kind of the reckless, not necessarily reckless, but kind of the more brash Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obviously, Queen Amidala's got kind of very headstrong in what she's trying to accomplish. And obviously you throw Anakin into the mix and everything, and basically Qui-Gon is basically this giant babysitter for a bunch of people. But he has this great spot that he occupies. It's a very important part. He's the one that identifies Anakin and brings him into the fold. Believes so heavily in this that he literally, as he's dying, basically makes Obi-Wan swear to him that he's going to train Anakin. He believes in it. And I think this character, despite for the longest time only showing up kind of in the one film, made an immediate impact on the fandom. I think the legacy of the character is very much intact. I know Liam Neeson has come back to reappear as the character a couple of different times. He did the voice, I think, a couple of times in maybe Clone Wars. But ultimately, kind of the big moment was he actually appears as the Force Ghost in in the last episode of the Kenobi series they did on Disney Plus. Kind of bringing it all full circle. So all that's just super cool. But throughout this movie, every time I see Liam Neeson as a Jedi Knight, I'm like, that's awesome. And I think he's really bringing a big sense of Chris, what's that word?
Gravitas? Is that the word you're thinking of? Gravitas?
That's it. Yeah,
okay.
That's it. Nailed it. So no, I think he is great. I think I like it a lot. I like the performance a lot. I like the character a lot. And it's sad that he dies at the end of this movie. Sorry, spoilers, folks, for the 25-year-old movie. But it's cool. I like it a lot. So that's where I'm going. Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn.
I'm just gonna go say I agree, and he also gets my Mark Strong award. I don't know if this was necessarily a hot take. I mean, he's the lead of the movie, but I wasn't sure anybody else was going to go in this way because I think it's really easy to take him for granted because so much of this performance is just presence. He just seems knowledgeable and wise and such a strong mentor. And that's just something that you just like has like an aura around him. And it's easy to take for granted, especially now. We've seen Liam Neeson do this type of role so many times. But I think this is really a turning point in his career because he's had, long career before this, but mostly smaller roles, character roles, occasionally leading man. But this is the beginning of his like elder statesman, wise mentor role. This goes right to like Batman Begins in 2005. He's the leader of the team and A-Team. And this is sort of, after this, it's either like mentor or old action star.
Or Taken. It's this or Taken.
Yes. It's such a strange career. We talked about it before. He's an alum of the show, like on the aforementioned A-Team. Probably a previous Mark Strong Award winner, but I don't know. There's no way to check. But I'm agreeing with you. Also getting my Mark Strong Award. It's tough because even though he's not stepping into the role of Obi-Wan, that's the strongest comparison. And Alec Guinness, his portrayal of Obi-Wan in that original series is held on such a pedestal. And so for someone else to also be like the older Jedi mentor, that's going to be the immediate comparisons. And I don't think he falters one bit. And he makes that type of role his own. And like I said, super believable. It looks effortless the way he's able to just be wise. Like he's so good. He's so good at it.
It's a very tough thing to enter it. So you're walking into this semi-established universe. Like obviously we know what Star Wars is, but we don't really know anything about this time period. And
we just know it's a long, long time ago.
I meant specifically in relation to the original movies. Chris, don't be a jerk. But when you're walking into a kind of a fully formed universe as a new character, it can be a difficult thing to find that right balance. But he manages to exist in this world and also feel like he has existed in this world. Like you're seeing a character that clearly has a history, that has been doing his thing for a long time. It never feels like you're watching somebody play it, because that can happen, especially in these older franchises. When somebody shows up as a new character, it kind of feels like they're like completely new to the universe as a whole as well. Like they're shocked by everything. They're impressed by everything. They don't really. And with Qui-Gon, you've definitely got a character that knows his stuff, has been around a long time, isn't really shocked by anything that he sees, and all of that, I think, plays into why the character works so well. Because it would have been easy to kind of have this be more of a fish out of water type thing, but they save that for kind of Anakin, as he kind of is the fish out of water, seeing the world for the first time. Qui-Gon's been around the universe a few times, and it comes through in the character, and I think it's definitely part of what makes it work so well for me, too.
I love Liam Neeson, and I really like the point Andrew just made. When I've talked about Star Wars in the past with my co-host from DraftPunks, Travis McGahee, we've talked a lot about how good the world building feels in a lot of Star Wars. Like the Star Wars films, the plots, they're fun, they're exciting, but like we love, when some side character gets like 8 pages of backstory on Wikipedia and he appeared in like 3 seconds of a background shot in Return of the Jedi. Like that's like one of the things we really love about Star Wars. So when you're talking about how it feels like Liam Neeson from the moment he's on stage, like has lived in this world his whole life and just kind of understands. I love that. And I think they use Anakin to great effect in this movie. Not necessarily in the performance, but just as you say, is that fish out of water, and it makes sense for his character. He's never been off this planet, that when all of a sudden you go to Coruscant, it's just mind-blowing for him. You get a similar thing in episode 7 where Rey goes to visit Maz Kanata's tavern. I can't remember the name of the planet, but says, I didn't know there was this much green in the whole galaxy. And it's just this awesome moment for her character. And I think
I just can't believe you don't remember the name of the planet that Maz Kanata's
I'm sorry.
place.
I'm a little
thought
disappointed
we
in
had a big
myself.
Star Wars fan.
You're right.
on,
You're
but-
right. You're right. So I think Liam Neeson's a fantastic choice for this. He's probably the correct choice. This morning I asked Chris if he could define the Mark Strong Award for me, because I wanted to be like my co-host Travis. I wanted to get a little weird with this. And I'm going to tell you, Chris's direct quote that he sent me is, a performance that single-handedly improves the entire movie. And I think a performance that not only improves this entire movie, but Star Wars as a whole, is not a person. I think it's Darth Maul's lightsaber. That's my Mark Strong Award. Am I allowed to do that? Can I do that?
You can do whatever you want. I mean,
If you want me to,
but-
I'll pick
yeah.
Ray Park. I'll pick Ray Park if we need to do it that way as Darth Maul.
Let's just go ahead and take this opportunity to break down all of Darth Maul. I want to hear your thoughts about the lightsaber specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But my runner-up, the other person I was considering for Mark Strong Award, is Ray Park as Darth Maul. So I got a lot of positive thoughts to share on that performance. But start with the lightsaber and why you think that's worthy.
So I mentioned before, I'm 11 years old. I'm sitting in a theater for the first time ever to watch a Star Wars movie. We've already seen him fight Liam Neeson once in the desert earlier in the film. Very traditional lightsaber battle, although much more frenetic than anything we had seen in the original trilogy, for sure. And you got to remember, like, coming in as a fan, if you've seen those 3 older movies, like the lightsaber fight between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader in A New Hope is... It's comically bad.
It's like extremely limited. Like it really is. Like it's almost all in wrestling. It's called a psychology match. Like they're really mostly just staring at each other with their lightsabers on, taunting each other. Like there's really not a whole lot of fighting. Like
to the point where they've like had to retcon that in books and comics sometimes to be like, well, they were just using the Force to like silently fight so hard that it didn't look impressive physically, but it,
Of course, of course, the expanded universe did that. Of course, it did. It couldn't just leave it alone. It had to be like, no. There's an explanation for why this isn't impressive.
Right. And so in episodes 5 and 6, the fighting gets a little bit better, but we'd never seen anything like what we see in episode 1. And so sitting in the theater, we get this lineup. They're walking through the hangar, and all of a sudden, Darth Maul just steps out, and he pulls out the lightsaber, and he lights. The red blade comes out of one end. And then it's a delay. They don't come out at the same time, but a moment later, the second blade comes out. And when I tell you, people were children like me jumping out of our chairs. Like that was the most exciting moment of that film.
It is such a cool moment, and the movie sets it up so well. Like it's very clearly presented as a big reveal. But a question I had, what I couldn't remember is, are you saying that was not spoiled in the marketing? Because I feel like that's a trailer shot, him doing both. But I don't know. I certainly don't remember. I didn't rewatch any trailers. But I feel like it would have been, in this day and age, be spoiled of like, toys being leaked. Or Funko Pop where he's got the lightsaber out. But you're saying the surprise was, at least for you, intact when you saw this in theaters?
Yeah, it's extremely possible that this was known ahead of time. But again, as an 11-year-old with maybe dial-up internet at the time,
sure, yeah,
it was not something that I was aware of going in, for sure. But then that leading into Duel of the Fates, which I think, if you allowed inanimate objects to be selected, could just as easily be a Mark Strong Award winner for this film.
We'll be talking a lot more about this fight in a little bit, don't you worry.
Yeah. And then the fight itself is just absolutely incredible. Ray Park has 2 lines of dialogue in the movie, I think, and it's like you mentioned, voice aside. But
I'll talk about the voice in a second, because it's very strange to me who they picked to do it. So
yes. But yeah, all that aside, just like his menacing presence, a phantom menace, some might say. Was just like present throughout the movie, and then to see it like delivered upon in such a perfect way in that last sequence, it's the only shame in it is that it keeps getting interrupted by them cutting to what's happening in the Naboo throne room or, on the battlefield with the Gungans. Like, just
it's like when
give
you're
me
watching a
Duel of
Godzilla
Fates.
fight and it's the giant monsters and they have to keep cutting back to the humans and you're like, no,
Yeah.
get out of the way. Stop ruining this.
Exactly. So if I'm not allowed to pick the lightsaber itself, I will pick Ray Park, who wields the lightsaber in an extremely effective way. I think he kind of sets the bar going forward for the Star Wars franchise on what a true fight between two very strong Force wielders or three very strong Force wielders can look like. And it also, like, nowadays, weird lightsabers are very commonplace. But at the time, we had never seen something besides the traditional, blue, green, or red lightsaber. So to see the double-bladed there, and that's led to some incredible lightsaber designs. I love Count Dooku. That's one of the nice things I could say about the next couple movies, with the bent handle. Not so much the Inquisitors with the helicopter blades, but really just, changed the game for me. So that's my pick.
Okay, let me ask you, since you're deep in the weeds of Star Wars fandom, I love Kylo Ren's crossguard lightsaber. Yes, it's so cool. And not only the shape, but like the crackling that it does. And then I learned from my younger brother, who's super into Star Wars, like there's an explanation for that. It's never in the movies, but like the crystal that powers lightsabers, his is cracked. Right. It emits too much energy, so it needs like to let off the extra energy, and that's what becomes the crossguard.
Yeah,
super
absolutely.
Cool explanation.
Yeah, it has to vent out that extra energy, which is like so well defining for his character. Yes. I love that aspect too. I don't know that I'm a huge fan of the crossguard design, but that lore that you just mentioned is like what sells it for me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Is there anything like that for Darth Maul? Does he have two crystals in there? Why doesn't everybody have this lightsaber? It's so awesome.
I think it has to do with just how difficult it would be for people to use. I think it's hard enough to use a regular lightsaber without cutting off your hand. We have enough of that going on in Star Wars that to have the double blade, I think, requires a different level of skill.
I would love to. Every time I watch this and I look back at Darth Maul using the double-bladed lightsaber, I'm like, I swear this guy has just cut himself in half like 7 times. Like, anytime he's spinning it around, I'm like, there's no way this man is not effectively like decapitated himself doing this.
He should have really ghost shipped himself at some point.
He should have, 100%. He should have definitely ship full of ghosted himself at some point. But I do want to say, I did just put the original trailer on, and I was letting it run while you guys did this. They do absolutely spoil the double lightsaber in that trailer. Not with the same pacing, but you see it. Like, they show him turn on the second blade, like, for literally a split second, and then you see one moment with him having it. But just seeing it's one thing, but, like, the reveal still, like, there's no way that wasn't awesome. Yeah, and I saw this in theaters many times, but I gotta make sure I get this correct for the record books, the official BOTR record books. Our original guest, our very first guest, I should say, for our Batman v Superman episode, Thompson Conradi, established the Micro Mark Strong Award, and I think that's how we're gonna award the double lightsaber. It's getting a Micro Mark Strong Award. Okay. Brian, are you okay with Ray Park getting your official Mark Strong Award?
Absolutely. I mentioned that I was Darth Vader for a Halloween or two before this movie came out. I think I was Darth Maul for the next 4 years after Episode 1 released.
Really? So, now, how... it's much easier to do a Darth Vader costume. How are you doing Darth Maul as a little kid?
We went out. My parents got me, and it was way oversized, which is why I was able to wear it 4 years in a row, I think. But it was one of those just big, full... head rubber masks. I was sweating consistently the entire night. We had the toy double red lightsaber, which every kid had. Yep.
I love the idea of like a bobblehead Darth Maul.
And then I think I just wore like a black sweatsuit, like a sweatshirt and sweatpants, and like a cape tied around my neck.
It works.
Yeah.
Dressing as a Sith is really easy once you get past like the distinctive face. That's really it's just wear all black. And then have, like, if Darth Vader... Like, you don't need the rest of what Darth Vader wears. You have the Darth Vader helmet. Everyone knows what you are.
Get the mask, glue some buttons to your shirt. You're good.
Yep.
I was Darth Vader once. I had a very, very cool helmet. Very nice design. Like, in 2 pieces. And then I had like a Dracula cape, and that was it. Like it was just a helmet.
Everyone knew.
And then, like,
everyone knew what you were. Everyone knew
Exactly.
what you were.
Exactly.
Yeah. My only other, I've done those two, and then I have dressed as Luke Skywalker more recently. I've turned to the light side. And then for a couple of years, I had a little Admiral Akbar phase where I had one of the original Dawn Post masks from like the
Wow.
late 80s. Yeah. It's fallen apart since then because those things
Yeah,
do
that
not
stuff
preserve
is
super
not-
well.
I feel like if he
That's,
dressed as
yeah.
Admiral Akbar, it's like Bart in that one episode of Simpsons where everyone's like, "Say it, say the line, say the line."
That's
It's a
exactly what
trap.
it was like. Yes.
No, it's funny. Those rubber suits are those rubber thing like the like a lot of the original Power Rangers monster suits have just like completely deteriorated. Like they couldn't even try to preserve them if they wanted to.
Right.
They just completely fell apart. But
Yeah.
it's still awesome. Your dedication is still admirable.
Admirable Akbar. There it is. We got
There
there.
it is. Nailed it. First try.
Cards Against Humanity does a big Black Friday thing. They do like auctions.
Mm-hmm.
And one year they had one of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles costumes from the movie, and
yeah.
it looked horrifying.
Wow,
It was,
it looked
they were
like-
like, they were like,
zombie
"This is in
turtle,
horrible
like-
shape. It smells bad. Don't ask how we got it, but you can have this if you fit for it."
I got $20.
Like I said, I was considering Ray Park because something I like to do when I'm kind of considering a Mark Strong award is like, okay, what if someone else was in this role? How does it change? And no one could have done this but Ray Park.
Mhm.
Certainly convinced of that. At least some of the shots they get. Ray Park is originally a stunt performer in the movie and gets bumped up to actually playing the role. And this, does so much for his career moving forward. I mean, he had been a stunt performer for a long time. He had some on-screen roles. He was in Men in Black already in a minor role, but gets some lines. But mostly doing stunt work. And I think this really tips the scale to being more of an on-screen character. He does X-Men after this. We talked about him actually.
I was gonna say, yeah. Let's not
X
forget
versus
his
Sever?
wonderful turn as Toad in X-Men. Yeah.
I guess he is now a 2-time Mark Strong Award, but I'm pretty sure one of us gave it to him in X versus Sever, Andrew. But
No way to find out.
No way to find out. No way to check. But without a stunt performer in that role, you can't shoot the coverage in that fight the same way. It changes the movie entirely. It's fantastic. And my memory, it's been a long time since I watched this, but I actually thought he didn't speak in the entire movie. I thought he was a silent character, which
He is mostly silent.
yeah, but we do hear his voice, and we talked about someone else uses his voice. But I think if they didn't like his voice, I think they should have just cut his lines. I think his presence is so strong, we don't really need to hear him speak. But what I'm trying to say is I don't think it diminishes Ray Park's ability by the fact that they dubbed his voice. Like it's the performance is all about the movement and the flips and the jumps and the choreography, which of course he absolutely nails. Also, as someone who is only 5'4", we stay in a short king. I love that they don't try to make him look any taller than he is. They let him just be a little guy.
Yeah.
I like how he does all these flips, and yet no one accused him of killing the business. All this flippy stuff is just ruining everything. But no, I do agree. There's a presence to this character that is undeniable. Like when he shows up, he just looks like if I I would never run into this man on a street ever, but if I did, I'd be terrified. Just because I'd be like, this man is legitimately 10 inches shorter than me, and he's probably going to mess me up really badly.
They go so hard on that design. Like,
yeah,
all black
like
face. Well,
not to
not an all
yeah,
black
it's
face.
gonna
An all red face would have been cool. But the intricate design of the two colors, and on top of that, he has horns all over his head. Like any one of those elements would have been enough. They just throw it all together, and it works. It's
awesome.
Right. I thank you
go
for
ahead.
correcting the not all blackface there.
Yeah, that would have been bad.
But
Would anybody
agree,
have been
like-
surprised if George Lucas did that though? #PP.
He literally like looks like an embodiment of the devil, not to stereotype all Zabraks. # not all Zabraks.
Some of them are yellow instead of red. Don't
Right.
hate.
You like Savage Opress. What a name.
I mean, whatever
My
I
God,
saw.
these names. Names
Insidious.
Maul, Press. Jesus.
Yep.
Oh yeah, Insidious. I was like,
The
that's
first
not
thing you
Insidious.
think of is Darth Maul. Exactly.
So there, you also, in that same note, you can't deny the impact of the character. I remember after this came out, I had a friend. So this was 99. I was 12 years old or about.
You had a
to be
friend
12
after
years
this,
old.
Andrew? Good for you, man. I'm happy
I had
for
a
you.
friend. What? For this?
So after
was a
this came
long time
out, you
ago.
had a friend.
I did.
I'm just happy that you had a friend, man.
All right. Okay. That sounds oddly backhanded, but I'm gonna keep moving.
Hashtag PP.
What I thought was so funny is he was like, I think Darth Maul is gonna come back with robot legs. He said that flat out, was like, I think Darth Maul is gonna come back with robot legs. And that
Does your friend
eventually
work
happened.
for Lucasfilm?
He does not. It took a very long time for that to happen, but he did come back in the Clone Wars with like weird spider robot legs and pretty cool. But I never forgot that my friend said that he was going to come back with robot legs. That I remember seeing, like they said, it was like Darth Maul returns in the Clone Wars, like post Obi-Wan fight, not like a flashback. And they were like, and he's got robot legs. And I was like, what? I was like, there's no way. Yeah.
Were you still in touch with that person to reach out to them?
I did put a Facebook post on his wall like years ago when it happened, and I was like, dude, I don't know if you remember you said this, but I certainly do.
What if, this is very important, guys, what if now that Darth Maul has been killed, his legs come back with a robot torso?
Ooh.
It's actually C-3PO with Darth Maul's lower body. What I did want to talk about briefly, getting slightly back on task here, is they do oddly bring in somebody to do. Somebody else has always voiced Darth Maul besides Ray Park. It's Sam Witwer in like every appearance where he actually has real dialogue. But here, for some unbelievable reason, they get Peter Serafinowicz to do it. Now, I don't know if people know who Peter Serafinowicz is.
Can I say, I went down his Wikipedia to find out if I knew who he was, and one thing was, okay, he says, what a bunch of a-holes in Guardians of the Galaxy. That's how I know
he
him.
does. He's also the roommate in Shaun of the Dead.
Pete.
For anybody that's seen that, Pete. I know him primarily, and here, I guess John Wick fans might know him as the Sommelier from Chapter 2, the one who has all the guns. I actually love him for playing the Tick in the Amazon reboot of the Tick.
Yeah.
But like that's what I know him for almost exclusively, is like comedy stuff. Like I know him from like Spaced and Hardware and the Peter Serafinowicz show. Like he's this comedic actor that does like sketch comedy and stuff, like akin to like a Steve Coogan or something. And so it's always so odd to me that occasionally somebody will just call him and be like, you know what? We need you to do a super deep baritone voiceover for this character who has 2 lines of dialogue. And he's just like, all right. Which, why wouldn't he? I mean, you get the money. Like, get it. It's literally his first voice role, though. And like, he hadn't been around doing television that long at that point either. So I actually have no idea how he ends up in the orbit to voice Darth Maul. But he does not continue to do it. They eventually, like I said, they get Sam Witwer to do it. But it is so odd to me because it's legitimately like 2 or 3 lines of dialogue. Like it's not a lot. And like you said, it's almost not even necessary. Like you could have just cut all the dialogue and just had the character not speak and it would have been fine. But it is so strange to me that Peter Serafinowicz voices Darth Maul. It just seems like such an odd check mark on his resume. But hey, I'm sure that Star Wars check he gets every year is not bad.
Last thing I want to say about Ray Park and this character before we move on is, or if you guys have more to say, feel free. But
thanks for the
like
permission, Brian. I really
yes.
that.
I'm sorry, it's not my show. I get. But like with Liam Neeson and Qui-Gon, where he seems like always pretty happy to return to that character, like Ray Park is like always doing appearances. Like if you have your lightsaber with you, he will take it and he will twirl and flip all around the room. Even now, there's like always videos popping up of him at cons, like doing his stunts from the movie still, which is awesome.
That's really cool.
He just seems like he really loves the franchise and loves that, like he's known for playing this awesome character.
And if you say that you love his performance as Toad, he will lick your face. That's how into giving back to the fans that he is.
And if you say you're a fan of him as Snake Eyes, he rips your vocal cords out.
guys, Ewan McGregor's in this movie. He plays
Yes, he is.
a little character called Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mentioned earlier how Liam Neeson probably had some pressure stepping into the mentor type role, but this guy, Ewan McGregor, he's playing an established character. So, yeah, I bet he felt a lot of pressure. Even though this is obviously in a very different point in this character's life, there's just a lot of weight to it. We know where this character is heading. We know the importance of it. And I will say right now, in episode 1, he's just an apprentice. He doesn't... Obviously, this role is going to grow over time. So I don't think, maybe he didn't feel that pressure so much in this movie versus some of the sequels to it, we're going to be talking about later in the month. But I think this is an excellent pick, of course. So Ewan McGregor is just a wonderful actor. I was wondering where this falls in his filmography, because he really blows up, at least in Hollywood, after this. Moulin Rouge just around the corner. Big Fish, one of my favorite Tim Burton movies, comes a few years after this. But this is after Trainspotting, which is probably like his, where everybody first takes notice of him. And it could not be a different movie. It is wild that he's in such a hard to watch, hardcore drug film. And then a few years later, they're utilizing his like natural boyish charm to be the apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think it's just such a smart pick. It's interesting. I'm thinking about the movies George Lucas would have seen him, the performances he would have seen him in, and thought, yeah, that guy, what's he doing in that movie? Diving into the toilet. That's my Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's incredible, but obviously an eye for talent. This was, God, I can't even imagine how many people they looked at to play this role, but they picked the right guy, and obviously, we get the Disney Plus series. He's still performing as Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's conveniently aged to look just like Alec Guinness. Just real, really hit the hammer on that. Yeah,
I don't know what wizardry they were using to predict that, but they came out on the right side of that. But no, I think you're right. This obviously like Qui-Gon is an interesting character because he has to be this established character and he has to feel kind of lived in. Whereas this is a character that has not just an existing actor having played that role, but somebody of the caliber of Alec Guinness, an extremely iconic performance that people are big fans of. So to have to come into that and kind of make it your own while still honoring what's come before is not an easy thing to do. And here he gets to play it a little bit differently because he's still, like I said, kind of young, kind of brash, will run into decisions kind of quickly without necessarily thinking it through. Qui-Gon's still having to correct him and kind of easy now, easy, but it's still a good performance. And then, like I said, over the course of these films, you kind of see him age into the kind of character that will be a lot more synonymous with what Alec Guinness ends up doing. But I think the legacy of this performance speaks for itself because, like, when the minute Disney acquired Star Wars, I remember people saying this is one of the things they hoped would happen, was that Ian McGregor would get a chance to do something else as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so I think, obviously, like you said, I think it's a great pick. I think the performance speaks for itself. And ultimately, I think as far as the fandom goes, the fact that there was such a demand for him to come back as the character, even all these years later, which there is now... I think the gap between Episode 1 and the Kenobi series was the same as the gap between Star Wars and Episode 1, if not more. But that's breaking my brain to think about. But
Damn. It's too early in the morning for this. Please stop.
But anyway, I agree. I think it's a great performance. I think it's building towards what we expect from the character. I remember the look was definitely questioned, like the flat top with like the weird braid of hair behind his ear and stuff like that. Yeah. People were like, what is going on here? But it's great. And he's making all the right steps in the right direction. And then, like I said, the legacy of the performance, and I think how people view him as the character kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think even in that first movie, and definitely by the third, the biggest question was, how does he go from looking like Ewan McGregor to Sir Alec Guinness, by then
it's
episode
such a short
3,
amount of time.
18 years. And even in the Kenobi show, he's obviously older in real life, and I think they did a little bit to make him look a little bit older as well. But you're still questioning, like, how does this guy end up looking like Alec Guinness? But
it's the X-Men problem, where by the time you get to X-Men Apocalypse, James McAvoy is like 5 years away from
being
X-Men
Patrick
1,
Stewart,
which is 2000 from Patrick Stewart. Yeah, so
yeah. I was looking because you talked about what are his big roles, and I agree with you. I think it is Star Wars and Moulin Rouge maybe, and Big Fish. But it's interesting because we think of him as this big movie star, and he's never been nominated for an Oscar. The only Golden Globe he's won was for TV when he did Fargo a few years ago, which was an excellent season. Yeah, he played identical twins, and he did it very well.
And only got one award. How lame.
Yeah, he should have gotten it twice. But that's like the only Golden Globe.
They were only impressed
with
one of the twins. He got the award specifically for one of the portrayals.
That's fair. I was just gonna say, I love that he got to play opposite Mary Elizabeth Winstead in that. His wife was, Ramona Flowers and Scott Pilgrim, and has done a bunch of great stuff too. So that was
forget that they're married. I truly do forget that. But I will also point to, it is interesting because he gets these, like, I remember when that Christopher Robin movie was coming out, like the aged Christopher Robin Winnie the Pooh movie, and he was going to be in that, and they were presenting that as like this big prestige project, and then it kind of came and went with very little fanfare. He did do the Trainspotting sequel, which was better than I thought it would be. If you thought a movie all about drugs was good, wait till you watch the movie all about how these guys survive doing drugs. But the one I do want to shout out that he was in that I thought was excellent was Dr. Sleep. He plays the grown-up Danny Torrance from The Shining in Dr. Sleep, and he is excellent in that. He is absolutely perfect in that movie. That's another, talk about stepping into established roles. So
that means the young boy that played Danny Torrance in The Shining probably now looks like Alec Guinness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly
that's how that
what
all
that
works. Ian McGregor has a few years to go before he's the same age Alec Guinness was in the first Star Wars, but I'm curious if he takes that grizzled, gravely looking dive in the next 10 years or so. But yeah, it is interesting. It's one of those people, like, everybody knows who Ian McGregor is, but yeah, it's not necessarily translated into like a
prestige.
whole lot of other prestige. But I liked him.
I love that you brought up Dr. Sleep, though. Yeah.
I love Dr. Sleep, dude.
I love that movie. It's one where you tell people, like, they made a sequel to The Shining, and they're like, oh, and then you tell them, yeah, it's about energy vampires who want to eat your Shining. Wait, what? Like,
what? Who?
But it works. It works so well. It's a great movie.
And it functions on a whole lot of, because it's a sequel, but it's an adaptation of Dr. Sleep. Then it's a sequel to the Shining book, and it's also a sequel to the Shining movie, and it somehow manages to function as all three, which is not an easy thing to do.
No, because the book and the movie have very different endings for the Shining.
Right, and so to make a movie that effectively acts as a sequel to both is not easy. But that also speaks to the ability of Mike Flanagan, who wrote and directed Dr. Sleep, to the point that, like, now pretty much if he does something, I'm going to check it out, because I'm like, okay, I can't really deny that this guy essentially knows what he's doing. I know he's doing the next Exorcist movie, which I'm like, well, if anybody can kind of dig this back up and fix it, this is the guy. But yeah, so I did just want to shout out Ian McGregor and Dr. Sleep, extremely good. And if you haven't watched Dr. Sleep,
go check it out.
It's very good.
Flanagan also just got tapped for an 8-episode Carrie series, which I wonder how they're going to make that 8 episodes. But I will check it out because it's Mike Flanagan.
It is. It's one of those things where, like, any other circumstance, they'd be like, we're doing another version of Carrie. I would be like, we've done it twice now. Do we really need to go back and do that again? But they're like, it's Mike Flanagan. I'm like, well, all right. The Exorcist was the same way. Like, I saw Exorcist Believer, and I was like, okay, hashtag PP. And then they were like, we're going to do another one. And I was like, well, I don't know. And then they were like, Mike Flanagan's going to do it. And I was like, well, all right, and here we go.
Natalie Portman plays Padme Amidala, the Queen of Naboo. I think this is my favorite character in the movie. At least one of them. And I'm not trying to be backhanded about the performance. It's a good performance. But I love this queen who is not even though they're young, not afraid to stand up to leadership and the way things are in the Senate. And not only isn't afraid to stand up, but is willing to be with the people, as she says, have the same fate as them, but doesn't just go back to Naboo to be slaughtered or taken prisoner or whatever. She's the one that comes up with the master plan that we see in the finale of this movie. Like, it's all her idea. She's telling the Jedi what to do, and that is so cool. This character, like, we talk about, the leading women roles in film and its history, and sometimes it's just a mixed bag. As far as often being reduced to just a love interest or whatever, and her love story will come in the movies to follow, but you think of like Princess Leia, who's generally seen as a pretty good example when you think of the time period that was in, but you go back and you look at it now and it's like, okay, there's some things maybe we could have done better. I think this is fantastic. It's aged well. I love just the confidence of this character. And like I said, the fact that the main thing is the fact that this entire finale and plan of action is her plan, and it's really smart and executed really well, and she's in charge. I think that was awesome to put that on this character. Never a damsel in distress, and in fact, the mastermind of all of the heroes' actions and how they get out of this. As far as the performance, Natalie Portman's doing a great job. It's so, like, it's really reserved right now. I know this character is going to evolve, but it's so much about showing that confidence and being regal and being just deadly serious all the time. I think it's good that we get to see the character grow and relax a little bit and have fun as the series goes on. I know this is already a rant already, but you guys can talk about how much you like the performance or whatever. But another question I have, trying to think back to audiences in 1999, just kind of we talked about, was the dual lightsaber surprise. Is the reveal that she's the handmaiden a surprise? Because I feel like, Natalie Portman's star power has only grown. She's so well known. It's very obvious to look at this and be like, well, I know Natalie Portman's Padme. That's the queen right there. But the movie presents it as a big reveal. And she's an alum of the show. She was in Mars Attacks before this. Leon the Professional as like her, she hits the ground running as far as a career. I feel like audience has had some idea of Natalie Portman and what she looked like. Was that meant to be a reveal to the audience or just to the characters in the film?
I think a little of both. I think when you like having the kind of figurehead be played by somebody more unknown and then have the assistant be, especially if you're going to spend more time with that assistant, I don't think that's that strange. But also, I don't think Natalie Portman is that famous when this comes out. Like, she's notable to some people, but, like, I don't know that she's notable enough to be like, oh, well, she's clearly the queen in disguise. Like, I guess the other piece of it is probably is you don't find what you're not looking for. So if you're not expecting there to be a twist with the queen, I don't know why you would think that this is the queen in disguise, especially since the queen in disguise is, like, going into the Tatooine village with all the miscreants.
Well, honestly, my assumption was that audiences knew Natalie Portman played the queen, but I guess that's not the case. They just knew she played a character called Padme.
I don't remember. That was
okay.
a long time ago. I was 12 years old, man.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat there. And I mean, they got a pretty good actress to play the double. I mean, burying the lead here, but it's Keira Knightley who is portraying that role. Who was also an lead?
I mean, in 1999, she's a complete unknown, right?
Right.
Natalie Portman?
And she's gone on, I would say, to be just as, if not more, famous than Natalie Portman with the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise and all that.
Yep.
But I think part of it is just that when you see that the Queen Amidala character, she's covered in so much makeup and the costuming and the headgear and all that it does make it tough to kind of obscure like that difference between her and Natalie Portman.
Dude, that woman's poor neck. Again, she just does not turn her head anytime she's got elaborate. Because how could she? Like, she's got to have the strongest neck muscles.
Chris, I'm curious because you talked about how she's the mastermind behind this big battle plan at the end of the movie. Do you know and I know this because of Weird Al Yankovic, but do you know canonically how old Queen Amidala is in this film?
Well, Wikipedia is telling me 14. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's the line in the Weird Al The Saga Begins song about the love story between Anakin will come, but right now he's just 9 and she's 14. But so I do think it's impressive that she was able to come up with this great strategy that these, the Jedi who are trained in military tactics couldn't necessarily come up with on their own.
Friggin' idiots. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I think Qui-Gon makes it very clear that, like, it's not his role to fight the war. Like, he will assist
True,
her.
because they are supposed to be, peacekeepers at this point in Galaxy. Yeah. They also have this whole thing about how Naboo only elects these young female queens because they believe they have a childlike wisdom that adults don't have, which again apparently includes
Best not to
tactics.
think about that too much, apparently.
Yeah,
There's some troubling stuff there to really when you dive into it. But I do like how the peacekeeping, like the minute Darth Maul shows up, the Jedi are just like, nope, we'll take care of this. That's fine. We'll do this part. We'll do this part of the fighting. We won't do the rest of it.
Yeah, and that whole scene is really interesting to think about because they haven't seen the Sith in so long. So they've trained their whole life to fight this thing that they've never encountered before. So I guess it's not too surprising that Qui-Gon is killed by it. It's impressive that Obi-Wan's able to overcome it. But yeah, they've spent their whole life, being peacekeepers in ways that don't involve an enemy that uses the Force at all, which gives them a very inherent advantage in those situations. Jedi are, at the end of the day, cops in this era of the galaxy.
They're not just cops; they're wizard cops. I mean, these guys are nuts. But yeah, like I can't imagine, like, because they do run into Darth Maul on Tatooine, and Qui-Gon engages with him briefly, and then obviously he runs away like the coward that he is. No, I'm kidding, folks. But if you just killed him right there, guys, you were in a cruiser with blasters on it. It's it's still, like I said, at this point I think they say the Sith have been gone for like 1,000 years. So like, yeah, definitely you see a dude show up with a red lightsaber, you'd be like, who? Yeah, sir, this is a Wendy's.
And we now know, thanks to the Acolyte, that's not true. That there was a Sith around within the last 100 years.
We eventually found that out because
the lead
has a master. Because Plagueis is Let me phrase that. In the old canon, I don't know if this is still canon, Plagueis is technically still alive when Phantom Menace starts. He is dead by the end of Phantom Menace because Sidious kills him, I think, but Plagueis is still alive. And so the Sith have been there, they've just been in hiding. That's kind of the point. I know the Acolyte expands on that more, but like, the expanded
have you guys watched
universe is
the Acolyte?
I have not,
okay,
because life is pain.
Okay.
I haven't, but I've heard that's one of the better of the Disney Star Wars.
Yes, I really liked it, and there is a reveal there that introduces some Sith lore and potentially some Plagueis things. And unfortunately now it's been canceled, and we'll never understand what was going on there.
What about my boy
Darth
Bane? Is Darth Bane showing up anywhere?
I have not seen Darth Bane.
I just like his name is Darth Bane. I just like that his name is Darth Bane. I imagine him having a mask that makes him completely unintelligible. It makes it even funnier.
Now, in 1999, undoubtedly the biggest casting news, some of the most anticipated anyway, was that of a young Anakin Skywalker. Fans know the importance of this character. In fact, the main poster for this movie is that beautiful Drew Struzan poster, it's awesome. We talked about it a little bit earlier.
Hung in my room for about 20 years. Yeah.
What a terrifying thing to have Darth Maul's eyes looking at you. The first poster I remember is of Jake Lloyd on Tatooine casting a shadow, and the shadow was the silhouette of Darth Vader. I remember seeing that and being like, whoa, like this, this is, we knew some way or another episodes 1, 2, and 3 are coming because of the naming convention of the series, and this confirming that, it's going into the backstory of the man who would be Vader. Hype meters going up. Gosh, we talked about the reception of this series, and I think people that maybe didn't live through it or don't remember, it's easy to forget the insane backlash. If you just look at the financials and the kind of the current reception, you might think, oh yeah, audiences were split. Some people didn't like it, but there was a fervorous backlash to these films from the established fan base and otherwise. On a previous episode, I mentioned the documentary, The People versus George Lucas. That's about many things as far as problems people have with George Lucas, but one of them was simply the quality, or the perceived quality, of the prequel films. At the time, a lot of that hate gets directed to Jake Lloyd, which is insane because this is a little boy. Absolutely.
He's literally 10 years old when this comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Literally 10 years old. Like, alum of the show, Jake Lloyd, on our Jingle All the Way episode, where he was literally 7 years old. Like, that's 96. That's full on 3 years before this. Like, we touched on this with Ghostbusters. How there are just fans who don't get it. And they don't understand. And I blame the internet and, honestly, the parents. But no, just this idea that I can't just not enjoy something. I have to make sure the people who made it also know I didn't enjoy it, but also know that they are why I didn't enjoy it. And it's created this insane sense of entitlement that, people think it's new. Phantom Menace was 25 years ago. And yes, I slipped a disc in my back just saying that out loud. I understand. But it's not new that fans go on these campaigns. Like, you hear about stuff like when Michael Keaton got cast as Batman and how there was like a letter writing campaign where fans are like, Mr. Mom is Batman. Are you serious? That's like small potatoes. And now everybody loves Michael Keaton as Batman and they're annoyed that DC squandered his return and now nobody even remembers it happened. But it's insane the level of hate that Jake, and in turn, we'll talk about it in future episodes, Hayden gets for this. That they basically are almost completely shouldered with the responsibility of, quote unquote, why these movies are bad from an acting perspective. And, George Lucas, you mentioned The People versus George Lucas. I remember there was a Clerks animated series for a few years. There's an episode that's got a legal drama part of it, because of course it does. There's a gag that the character of Randall keeps marching up filmmakers that made bad movies, and he keeps asking for his money back. And the judge okays it because it's Judge Reinhold. But so this joke that creators owe us money for wasting our time. I mean, George Clooney even said he'd give people money back if they said they saw Batman. Like, so, and he's joking and he's like kidding around and he's trying to just roll with the joke. But then you realize that these people aren't really kidding. These people have taken it way too far. And Jake Lloyd, you are accountable for your own actions at the end of the day. But a lot of the struggles he has later in life, I'm like, it plays a factor. The fact that he got so relentlessly bullied after this movie came out.
Really set up many child actors get set up to fail in that way, but with the addition of the harassment, it's tough. I want to say this, though, unequivocally, I think he gives a good performance. Now,
he's doing exactly what he's being asked to do.
That's it exactly. Like, he's playing wide-eyed, enthusiastic, happy-go-lucky kid. And I think this begins a big issue with Star Wars fandom and other fandom where, like, you, to use the wrestling term, fantasy book what you want to happen, or you have expectations for what you want from these characters, and when it delivers something different, there's a backlash just because it's different from what you wanted. I think a lot of people were hungry for a young, evil kid, a little badass, someone that's going to become the awesome Darth Vader, and you could, maybe we get there eventually in the series, we'll talk about it as it goes on, but clearly, I think George Lucas wants the complete opposite. He wants a bright, optimistic kid to make the downfall that much harder. Yes. So the fact that he is, again, so happy-go-lucky, so boyish, I think it's a genuinely good performance. I think with kid performances, there's kind of different lanes. I don't want to say there's just two ways to look at it, but you have your Haley Joel Osment or Abigail Breslin, where it's like, this is an adult in a kid body. Like, they're giving, they're holding their own against the adult actors they're acting against, and they're just giving a traditional, like, great performance. Kirsten Dunst in Interview with the Vampire. But you also have little kids that are just great at being little kids. Like it's not easy to act. It's not easy for these kids to act. He's not just being himself. He's acting, but coming across as a 9-year-old, a believable 9-year-old boy. And so whenever he's giving lines that may seem cheesy, like "I'll try spinning, that's a good trick" and stuff, all these things have become memes. Like, he's a little boy playing in a cockpit. Like, that's exactly the energy, to your point, Andrew, that I think George Lucas wanted for this character. So I think, again, Jake Lloyd is doing exactly what was asked of him. I don't think it's bad performance. I think it's probably different from what a lot of people wanted at the time, or still want, or what have you. But that's obviously not on the kid actor. So thumbs up from me for Jake Lloyd.
Me as well.
I think that kid sucked. No. What if I just went full Star Wars theory here? No, I agree.
Oh God,
completely.
don't do that to us, man. Come on.
I agree with you guys completely. It's cheesy, but I think as the writing throughout the prequels showed, I think a lot of that was on the writer's room and George, as opposed to the performances that are being given. I think they're, as Andrew said, they're doing what they can with what they got. I think there's another character that I'm guessing we're going to be talking about shortly, who also got a fair amount of backlash, or unfair amount of backlash, I should say, but they at least were an adult. And so, and have had a bit of a redemption arc within the series too, which is nice, because I can absolutely understand why getting that kind of backlash would make you never want to associate with the Star Wars project again. But thankfully, I assume we're going to talk about Ahmed Best.
I'm sure we will. Yeah,
he's
at
come
some
back
point
to
in
the
this
franchise
4-hour
recently,
podcast. We will get around Ahmed Best.
we're already at an hour and a half, and we're not even we're at the fourth cast member. No, I think to touch on the point you made just there, Chris, I agree that I don't know if this is a new thing or not, but there definitely does feel like there's been this tick within fandoms lately that it's not what I want, therefore it's bad. Basically, especially when we start talking about established IP, when we start talking about sequels, when we start talking about legacy sequels, prequels, things like that, there's this that people come in with expectations. And when those expectations are not met, i.e., the character, Last Jedi is a great example of this.
I think it's exactly what derails the sequel trilogy. Yeah,
Luke Skywalker is not doing what I think he should be doing in this movie. People will go even further to say, the Luke Skywalker I believe in, which is a weird way to put that, would not do this. Basically, they go so far beyond it so that I understand this character better than Rian Johnson did. And that serves as the source of their anger, the source of their hatred, basically, that not just is this now not doing what I want it to do, he's now disrespecting it. So they take it a step beyond to, it's not just not doing the things that I want my action figures to do. It's now disrespectful to not do it the way I want, or the way he's doing it is disrespectful. And
can you imagine a Jedi Master going into a hermit-like way of life after a great failure? That would never happen to a Jedi Master. Why would that happen to Luke Skywalker? Sorry, we've talked about the sequel trilogy before. I don't mean
we don't need to relitigate it. But my point is essentially the same. I think with Jake Lloyd, I think you had a situation where there was this idea of how young Anakin Skywalker should be, and I think that didn't line up with what George Lucas did. But at the end of the day, you talk about having a plan, you talk about having a vision. People talk about Zack Snyder with his DC movies, they talk about Disney with the sequel trilogy. The prequel trilogy is unabashedly, 100%, unequivocally, unaltered George Lucas's vision. This is how he saw these stories. And so I'm not even saying that the people versus George Lucas is the way you need to go with it, but it is what he wanted. And so if you've got issues with it, it's with the man who created the whole thing himself. So maybe just sit down and have a Klondike bar and just relax. What would you do for a Klondike bar? Sit and not harass people. That's what I'm asking you to do for a Klondike bar.
I love movies. I love talking about movies. The whole thing we do on this podcast. And I don't mean to discount anyone's opinions, but if I hear something like, well, it was a good movie, but not a good Star Wars movie. Where do you go? This is no longer a discussion. This is just you saying, it's not what I
I think that caused a Wookiee sound to come out of Andrew there.
I can't stand. I hear that about stuff all the time. People like, people will be like Man of Steel. They'd be like, "Oh, Man of Steel's a good movie, but it's a bad Superman movie." And I'm like, "Well, since its goal is to be a Superman movie, that must mean it's pretty bad." Like hashtag PP, just for the sake of conversation. But like, yeah, I can't like. It's that idea that like, it's fine, but it's not a good Star Wars movie. Like I hear that about Last Jedi all the time, and I'm like, no, don't. Stop.
How about Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine, guys? Somehow Ian returned to this franchise.
He did.
Super
Which is
cool.
so weird
to have a returning cast member.
He must have been so young in that first movie where he plays this decrepit old man.
But he looks so wrinkly.
Like I guess in '83 he would have been, I guess, 39. So yeah, him aging actually works better for this character.
Now this is one where the audiences knows what's going on, right? Like whenever we're supposed to know that he's the one scheming behind the scenes, because I mean it's the guy that played the Emperor, like, right?
I'm pretty sure the credits even say Darth Sidious and Palpatine are played by the same guy. So
okay.
Again, this is odd. I truly don't know. I honestly, like, it's, again, this is so ingrained into my head that I truly honestly have no idea if this is meant to be a surprise or not.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. But similar, 11 years old in the theater, I think I remember reading there was like a People magazine that had like, a 20-page article, like introductions of all the new characters you're going to meet, stuff like that. I remember reading that before or after I went and saw the film. And I think it even had a line in at the end, like, but does this Chancellor hold a dark secret or something like that, So I think they were pretty open with it, at least in the advertising. And I'm sure fans who are older and more dialed in knew who he was and who he had played.
Which is okay. If you're ahead of the movie, it's not a bad thing. Like it's not a failing of the movie, but there's that big shot at the end where it's like, well, was he the apprentice or the master? And it pans over to Palpatine, and that sort of it confirming what you may have already been suspecting as he's whispering into the Queen's ear throughout the movie and stuff to gain power. But great performance though. I mean, he seems like a slime ball.
Yeah.
Okay, I will say this. I just ran the credits for episode 1. Ian McDiarmid is not credited as both characters. He is only credited as the Chancellor.
Okay.
Okay. And he
Darth
was one
Sidious is not mentioned at all.
Ian McDiarmid is one of 3 actors who portrayed Palpatine in the original Star Wars trilogy. The other 2 were
it's a woman
female
in Empire Strikes
artists
Back, right?
and
Yeah.
makeup artists, yeah. And they just put like super heavy makeup on them, and then they superimposed chimpanzee eyes over their actual eyes to make him look more Sidious. Insidious, apparently. I don't know.
Ahmed Best, Jar Jar.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the performance, they are on set, so actors can act off of them. They are providing the voice, which I don't think was the original plan, but does end up providing the voice in the final movie. And motion capture at the time isn't what it is now. His performance is used as reference, but it's completely animated over. So, again, it's all reference. I'm not trying to take away from the performance. Just want to be clear about what Ahmed Best is doing. But for all intents and purposes, Ahmed Best is playing Jar Jar Binks, another much aligned character at the time. And, as Patrick Willems often says, this is a movie about space wizards made for children. That's, at the end of the day, always what Star Wars is. I think maybe more than any other character, this character is there for the kids, which is probably why it bumps for a lot of people. You could say like maybe Chewbacca was there for the kids, but he's not also in turn #PP grating or irritating for adults. He's more like an all ages type character, or maybe the Wookiees.
Well, and the adults seeing the movie already have fond memories of Chewbacca too, from seeing him in the previous trilogy.
The Ewoks
Well, that's what I meant.
are
Like
the
at,
ones that
at,
are
Oh,
at,
okay.
at the
pointed to.
time,
Ewoks
like when
might be,
Star Wars
yeah,
comes out, I'm
that's-
trying to think of characters that were
That's fair, Andrew. I think
Before
Ewoks
Jar
might be a
Jar
better
Binks.
comparison to Jar Jar Binks. Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Ewoks are routinely pointed at with Return of the Jedi as like, oh, it's so silly because the weird cult, the weird guerrilla warfare tactics of the indigenous species of this planet should not be any match for the Empire, even though they live on this planet and they have all the terrain memorized and they can use it to their advantage. People are terrible, man. No, media literacy is dead.
just like Jake Lloyd. Ahmed Best is doing exactly what was asked of him. Exactly what the role was. Jar Jar Binks is supposed to be this clumsy, goofy, laugh at him character. Here, I mean, like in the final fight where he is like accidentally taking out all the droids, it's very like drunken master type fighting style, if you can even call it that.
Or Secret Sith Lord, perhaps.
Now I've heard the secret Jedi theory.
You haven't heard the secret
I feel like
Sith
the
theory?
Secret Sith Lord is a much bigger theory out there. They've brought it to life recently in the newest Lego What If Star Wars series. There is an episode with a Sith Jar Jar in it.
That sounds pretty fun. The theory I heard was that George Lucas intended this character to become a legitimate strong Jedi warrior, and a big clue, this is probably used for the Sith thing too, is like how he dives into the water is very Force Jedi like or whatever. I'm not deep in the weeds here. I've just heard this, and that the backlash caused him to reduce the role, which I think does happen, but also change course as far as his eventual path. I don't know. It's hard to say like what he intended or what have you. We don't need to go down there, or we do. Whatever. It's our podcast. We can do whatever we want, but.
I don't really want to talk about it because I don't particularly like the theory. It always felt like one of those things where I was like, all right, guys, this is like a Johan level stretch to like get to.
Absolutely.
We're ignoring a lot of detail and a lot of context here just to get to the what if Jar Jar was the bad guy? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do this.
I think it's entirely born out of memes, basically, and then that took on a life of its own. You know, the prequel memes subreddit, very popular, has a lot of influence apparently, and fortunately or unfortunately over Star Wars.
Hashtag PP at the time as a kid seeing this in theaters. I mean, I don't know. I might have liked Jar Jar on first watch. There's probably a point in my life where I'd have been like, yeah, Jar Jar sucks. That was annoying. What was he thinking? All the things that might have irritated me have softened so much over time. And rewatching this movie now, I'm like, this is totally harmless. Like, there's nothing about this that's like ruining the movie for me. It's silly and goofy and maybe not always making me laugh, but I'm a grown-ass man, and he's clearly not there to make me laugh. And so it's weird to me to think about how big the backlash was, like how angry people got at this goofy character that's clearly just there for comedic relief. And in that regards, the character, he's fine. He's fine.
It is a character that is doing exactly what is being asked of him. I spent most of my years after this movie came out hearing my father say Jar Jar lines to me, so my annoyance with Jar Jar is not the same as everybody else's. You don't like Jar Jar because you think he's a stellar character. I don't like Jar Jar because I was tired of my dad speaking like Jar Jar.
So you would like wake up and he would be like, Misa, make eggs, come down for breakfast?
No, he would just like, we'd be sitting and he'd literally just like, there'd be a moment to do like a Misa or something like that. And he'd just throw it in. And I would be like, oh God, speak like a human. I think the character, again, as far as the character's role getting reduced in future installments, and I don't know. These movies are packed full of stuff. It seems odd to me for them to imply that like Jar Jar was going to be this bigger role in the later films. Like, plenty going on there, enough as is. I don't really know. I'm not sure if that's been established or not. I do like that Ahmed Best got to kind of come back to Star Wars in his own way. He came onto an episode of The Mandalorian as a Jedi Knight named Kelleran Beck, who was basically the Jedi who saved Grogu from Anakin's
Order
rampage through the
66.
Jedi Temple. Yeah, basically they establish him as being the Jedi who saved Grogu, and I think
That's
that
cool.
was really, really cool. Did he have a purple lightsaber too, or is his green? I think it was green.
I think it was green.
Yeah, but
they also used that character to host a very short-lived YouTube show. It was like 8 episodes, and it was Legends of the Hidden Temple, essentially, but Star Wars.
What?
which was very cool. But,
How did I not know about this?
Yeah, they bumped it from Disney Plus to YouTube, so nobody saw it. But
Of course not.
he was also playing his Jedi character Kelleran Beck on that show.
Anyway, just thought it was cool that he got to kind of reconcile his time with the franchise in his own way, and hopefully now even more residuals.
Yeah. And I think hashtag PP, one criticism I do hear with this performance, along with Newt Gunray and his lackeys in the Trade Federation, is that there's some stereotyping in terms of the language and the way the characters speak and how they're being portrayed. And so I think that's where I agree, like, you can find the character annoying or grating. But I think there was also some question around sensitivity in terms of the accents that were being done by some of these characters.
Man, the Newt Gunray one is bad. That's bad.
I will say, much like Andrew's dad, I still also quote Jar Jar Binks. Travis and I, if we're playing like Balatro and we're looking for a certain Joker to come up in our shop, there's a deep video game cut. But we'll say, any help here would be hot, much as Jar Jar says when he's being interrogated by Boss Nass.
Now, for the sake of time, we've got to move on to scenes. I'm going to do a few shout outs here. If you want to jump in with any of your positive thoughts on these performances, have at it. Some of the stuff is merely cameos. Some of it is very cool. But Anthony Daniels reprising his role, C-3PO. Kenny Baker, they get in there as R2-D2, at least for some shots. Frank Oz voices Yoda. Samuel Jackson, this is the introduction of Mace Windu. We see him on the Jedi Council. Terrence Stamp plays the Supreme Chancellor that gets... I legitimately, watching this, I swear to God, I thought it was Malcolm McDowell.
You are watching a movie where Keira Knightley and Natalie Portman are literally playing the same person, and you're still pretending that Terrence Stamp looks like Malcolm McDowell.
I thought it was... Legitimately, I said, like, which one is that? I'm like, I'm listening to the voice. That's definitely Malcolm McDowell.
I don't know if this is better or worse than the Ian McShane, Gabriel Byrne
That's
comparison.
not even close, my God.
Look, that one I'm not going to die on the hill for.
I'm asking you very nicely. Please go to an optometrist. I'm begging you to please seek help.
I think it's my brain, not my eyes, to be honest with you.
I can't help you with that.
Terrence Stamp, Malcolm McDowell, I would die on this hill.
No,
and there
absolutely not. No.
So many side-by-side pictures you can see online. I'm clearly not the only one.
No.
All I want to say. But...
yeah, people on the internet agree with you. That's a really great defense,
I
Chris.
will use it when convenient. Absolutely. Frank Oz as Yoda. I watched this movie, and I'm like, oh yeah, CGI Yoda. The prequels do CGI Yoda, and they had to like make the CG Yoda look like a puppet and like add these things. I'm thinking of all these things. And I'm like, okay, I kind of miss puppets or whatever. And then I'm reading about the movie afterwards, and apparently upon release, it was a puppet. And there was only like 2 brief scenes where it's CG, and George Lucas did his George Lucas thing and added a CG Yoda. What? Hashtag PP. We're not here to rally. Why, George? Why are you doing this? Like, I did not realize basically that the prequel trilogies had been messed with in the same way that the originals have. But
it is one of the things I really do love about Last Jedi is that Yoda is a puppet.
Yeah.
Which people
for
make
now,
the argument
Andrew, we'll see.
No, I don't know. Don't even spec it into existence, dude. But it's I love that. And there's people who will be like, Yoda appeared last as a puppet, so his Force Ghost would be a puppet. Weird stuff like that. Where I'm like, I don't know about that. But because again, in episode 1, he shows up as a puppet the first time, and then he's CG in some of the later ones because he does some wild stuff that I'm looking forward to talking about. But yeah, that always drove me nuts that like he's a puppet, and so I genuinely am like, do I have to find the original DVD of Phantom Menace now to watch Yoda as a puppet? Apparently.
All right, again, we got to get to these scenes, and well, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna start with the best scene of the film, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, go ahead and start us off here. When is this movie firing on all cylinders, what is the best scene in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace?
It's the final lightsaber fight. No, I'll be taking no questions.
Brian, do you concur?
On to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's objectively the correct answer. Like I said,
I don't know that it's objectively the correct.
I'm
I think it's
highlighting a
pretty
different scene. My
objective.
pick is different, but this is.
Well, I was just gonna say, if we want to have more things to talk about, I know we've already been recording for a while. We have not said the word pod racing once yet.
Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
So-
We'll get to that.
There. It's
Let's
happening.
give the
Okay.
fight.
Anyway.
Let's give the fight its flowers.
Anyway,
but it's the
because
fight.
it is.
Yeah.
It is awesome.
So let me speak a little bit more now, since my joke answer is finished. Speaking to that scene that we alluded to earlier, with the idea of just that reveal of like the slow, like Darth Maul takes off. This is the first time we've seen Darth Maul like take off the cloak and like stand there and like do the lightsaber. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance. Oh yeah, that goes into this moment of him revealing the lightsaber and making that a big deal. And then like obviously Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are like, oh, here's our part of the finale. Let's walk over to our part of Act 3. But and it proceeds to have this insane fight through this weird room. I don't know what this is supposed to be, like a power generation facility for the entire city or something. I don't really know. But they are so it's a very cool location, just as far as for a fight to be. That does evoke some of the imagery of Cloud City or whatever have you. I will say though, we talked about those original movies where the lightsaber fights in four the lightsabers are extremely limited because you were basically having to like it was an arduous process, and it was kind of, I'm sure, very time consuming and costly to have somebody just hand animate a lightsaber frame by frame, or however they ended up doing it. And I'm guessing as the series went on, they were able to do a little bit more. But even in Empire Strikes Back, I feel like the lightsabers are still relatively limited. You see them a little bit more, but your only real thing is the Luke Vader fight at the end. And that's, again, another one that's, again, in wrestling terms, a lot of psychology. It's a lot of cat and mouse, a lot of back and forth. Obviously, you get the very iconic shot of like Vader in the smoke with the lightsaber turning on, which is if there's a moment like the double lightsaber reveal in the original trilogy, it's very much that. And then obviously the big blow off is Return of the Jedi, where you get the extended Vader Luke lightsaber fight. But I will say this, I think it's the prequels that spoil people on lightsaber fights, and to the point that when the newer movies don't have ones like them, they get annoyed. Because like you think about something like Last Jedi, there's really not even a lightsaber fight in that movie in the classic sense of the term. It's you get Rey and Kylo versus the Imperial Guard, you get Luke and Kylo on the planet, but like there's no like straight up back and forth laser sword fight, which definitely made people mad. But this fight here, as much as I love it, I think is the beginning of that trend of like just expecting there to be 20-minute lightsaber fights in every single Star Wars movie. But and why wouldn't you? Because it's awesome. It's something we've never seen before. Obviously, the double-sided lightsaber is a whole big new thing, but just the idea of a 2-on-1 lightsaber fight, that's completely new. We've never seen it before. Ray Park obviously doing like insanely crazy acrobatic stuff, because even like Luke versus Vader is a very stoic character. He doesn't move very much. He, at least until we get to Rogue One, I guess, where he starts using the Force and flipping people around. But Vader plays it very straightforward. Luke obviously is much more energetic and youthful in his fighting, but with this, you're getting the flips, you're getting the kicks, you're getting the jumps around, you're getting everything. And it goes on for a while. And the whole time this is happening, you've got this cool location, you've got this action you've never seen before, you've got these characters that are doing whole new ways to lightsaber fight. You've got this backdropped by John Williams' excellent Duel of the Fates, adding this epic choir, almost operatic type soundtrack to this scene that is just undeniable. It's the one thing I will say that I think, like, as much as I love Last Jedi, the score, I don't remember anything about the score. It's John Williams, but it doesn't stand out to me like the score here does in Phantom Menace. I think Phantom Menace has one of the best scores in the entire series, as far as creating new music, creating interesting music, all over, and Duel of the Fates stands on its own. It even, I think, got a music video because it was so good. But it is great. So you take all of these things, You mix them together, throw them in a pot with some broth, a potato. Baby, you got a stew going.
There's a moment in that fight that I think about all the time when it's after Maul has killed Qui-Gon and he's one-on-one with Obi-Wan, where he goes to try and cut through the back of Obi-Wan's head. And audio listeners, you won't be able to see me reenact this. I apologize. But Obi-Wan goes vertical over his head with the lightsaber and blocks it in the back, and then immediately comes back front and blocks him as he comes with the other blade to the front of Obi-Wan's face. I think about that move so often. It's just one of the coolest like sword fight maneuvers, even though it's just a block. Like, it just looks incredible. You know, it's like, it's up there for me with like, you know, Arya versus the Night King and Rey and Kylo fighting the Praetorian Guard in The Last Jedi. It's just incredible choreography in this fight. I'll say, you mentioned, you know, fans are looking for this now in every new Star Wars property because this set a precedent. The Acolyte, which you guys have not watched, has a scene that I think, for me, gets the closest. I won't spoil anything that happens, but it gets the closest to that moment for me, just in terms of how cool looking, how good the choreography was for a single fight. And it also involves multiple people. So
I thought the same. I had the same thing where Obi-Wan blocks behind his head and then back forward. It's
so good.
Cool. In my brain, again, I haven't revisited this movie in particular in a long time. When I think of the prequels, I think of a ton of lightsabers, and I think of them just constantly twirling their lightsaber in a circle. Like, I don't think of precise choreography. I think of them spinning a lightsaber and it reflects all the blasters, and it's just a lot of like 5-year-olds playing with swords on the playground. And I clearly just haven't rewatched this in a long time, because this is so precisely choreographed at the end, and you get those little moments, those little moves that stand out to really elevate the fight, and it is fantastic. I can only imagine how much they had to work on this, practice, and choreograph it. Obviously, Ray Park does this for a living. From what I can tell, we're mostly getting Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson in there. I'm sure there's some stunt doubles throughout, but they seem to get all the wide shots they need to make to pull this off. It's fantastic. And Andrew, I know you're selecting this fight specifically as your favorite scene, and it's great. But as much as it can be frustrating to get invested in this, and then the movie bounces around to the other storylines, the way they all choreograph together is so well done. The editing is fantastic. And the highs of the fights and the lows, there's a parallel amongst all of the stories going on. Yep. And the moment where they all get separated by those force walls here, and this fight comes to a rest for a moment. All of our heroes are down at the same time. Anakin's ship is overheated. Padme is surrounded, and they have to drop their weapons. Jar Jar Binks and the Gungan, is that the name of the aliens? Gungan army?
Yes.
Gungans.
Are surrounded by the battle droids, and it just looks hopeless for all of them. And then, of course, Qui-Gon dies, and then as Obi-Wan starts mounting his offense, all of the other storylines start having the baby faces rise again, all together and in unison. And it makes it just, each moment is more powerful because of what's happening in the other storylines, the way it's all choreographed together. Fantastic. Yeah, this fight is the best part of those storylines, but the fact that they all correlate so well, I think, is just great writing and great editing.
I do love that every single transition between locations doesn't just use a cut. It has to use some sort of thing. Like, it's either like a spiral transition or like a fade or like a cross.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
they love their wipes in Star Wars.
I didn't realize that, but like watching it back, like when we're in a scene, it's just normal cuts, but then we switch to a new location and it's like the wipe or the fade. I was like, oh, we do that all the time, don't we?
With Chris mentioning baby faces and Andrew dropped the "oh yeah" earlier. Now I'm just thinking, what if Darth Maul had lines throughout the entire movie, but he just sounded like Macho Man Randy Savage?
It would have been the best movie ever. Oh yeah,
the cream rises to the top.
He just calls them everybody a brother. All right, Jedi brother.
All right, Jedi brother.
The movie would be better
in a position I'd rather not be in.
This is the special editions that George Lucas should be working on. Just promo,
It just
wrestlerize, pro wrestling your movies, please.
There is somebody they did Darth Vader, but they redubbed all of his lines with Stone Cold. They just found the Stone Cold dialogue and switched it to Darth Vader, and it does remind me that somebody made a mod. I think it was for Skyrim, that anytime a dragon showed up, it had Randy Savage's face and talked like him. So, like, you'd hear, like, a dragon, and you'd just hear it be like, oh, yeah! And, like, it would soar through the sky, and then it would, like, land, and it would have his face, and it would just literally be saying Macho Man Randy Savage lines. And I'm like, this is what the internet should be for. Like, this is what we should be doing with our
good
time.
Use.
This is the best. And instead, we're being mean to each other. So, folks, embody Randy Savage, not meanness.
My favorite scene in this movie has always been and remains the pod race. I have not rewatched the entire movie until this week, but I have watched the pod race again. I played the hell out of the N64 game. I still have it. It's so good. It's genuinely so good. And if you've got, whatever issues you might have with this movie, I can't imagine any of it being directed at this pod race. So much work went into it. Like, this is early in the days of 3D pre-visualizing your action scenes, and this was meticulously planned out. Some of the effects I was reading were like 2 years in the making. I mean, they knew this was like the midpoint climax of the movie before we ramp back up again for the scenes we just talked about. It's so well done. Andrew, you talk about how good the score of this movie is, and I agree 100%. And it must have required so much restraint to not have a score through the majority of this race. The music drops out, and you just hear the engines of the pod racing and the collisions and the sound and the atmosphere, and it makes it so intense. Unlike the finale, we're not jumping around for different storylines. Our entire focus is on this race. The design of the pod racers is so cool. The two engines, it's like a futuristic chariot. So awesome. All the different characters we get introduced to. Brian, you talk about all you have to do is appear in a Star Wars movie for 3 seconds and you get this entire backstory. This race, we go through the lineup, we get all their names, we know nothing about these characters. I know there's lore out there, but you get talk about world building. You get the feeling that each of these characters has a history with one another, and we don't need to know it to understand how they work together, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, who plays dirty, who's gonna race with honor. It's awesome. The score does not kick in until we're down to just Anakin and Sebulba. I didn't look that up. Look at that.
You got that
pull
one
the name
right.
out correctly.
You nailed it. Yeah. Sebulba.
Until it's just the two of them, and then the music heightens the tension between this final lap between two racers. It's awesome. It's perfect. It's a great use of the technology of the time. Some of the technology in this movie holds up. Some looks a little dated, what have you. I think there's no changes need to be made to this pod race. It is just, it's perfect. I love it. It's thrilling. It's up there with, I know this is a race and not a chase scene, but it feels like it's shot like a car chase scene you'd see in a traditional movie. And I think it has all the same beats and all the same, tension as a classic movie car chase. And I would hold it up there with the best of them. I freaking love this scene.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, if we're picking best scene, it's got to be the ending fight for me. But this is a very close second. I absolutely love it. I agree with you. Played the video game a ton too as a kid. I was so excited when I finally unlocked Sebulba's pod racer, and you get the flamethrowers coming out of the side on that thing. I remember finding in an arcade once also like the full kit that had the Anakin cockpit that you could sit in, which is just so dope, and controlling it with the levers as opposed to like a steering wheel or a basic controller was just so much fun. But yeah, there's so many different versions of the scene too throughout the different cuts and things that were left on the cutting room floor that are included on DVDs. I actually watched a couple weeks ago It's like a 20-minute video, and it's on YouTube, split into 4 corners. And each corner, it's like the theatrical version, the DVD version with deleted scenes in it, and like
so they have
extended...
messed with the scene. I was thinking this
Yeah.
has remained, but this has been edited. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
It's been messed with quite a bit, yeah. But the extended version, like they really take time to go through every single guy that's in that race. So you can see why they have cut it down a little bit. I think the 4th one is like the Disney Plus version, maybe, and there's even a couple more edits. But yeah, they'll run side by side until there's, something is included in this version, not this version. So it'll go black or pause for a second, and then it'll pick back up when they sync back up again. So it was really cool to see like all these different versions that have been released to the public. And it kind of made me think of like the ending of Clue, where if you went to different theaters, you saw a different ending than someone else. Like if you watched it on Disney Plus, you saw something different than someone who saw it in the theater, as opposed to someone who knows it from watching it on the extended version on DVD, that came out a year after theatrical release. But yeah, I had a relative who got me super into NASCAR when I was like 8-9 years old, and so this is another scene that just like hit perfectly for me. I was like, oh, this is like a NASCAR race in Star Wars, and it all goes back to that, like that world building, that this is just a thing that exists, and Qui-Gon gets Qui-Gon, like you said, exists in this world. He knows what pod racing is. He's like, oh yeah, they do that on Malastare. Very dangerous. Like they don't take a ton of time to go through every single detail of what pod racing is. It's a race. It's dangerous. He's the only human that can do it. Like, Let's go.
Straightforward. And there's so much, like they're able to build in so much, just even with this simple concept that it's just engines pulling a cockpit, basically. The designs of all the different pod racers still find these ways to be so unique and so different. Like you've got Sebulba, obviously, with his giant engines with like the everything. And then you've got he's only a joke, but Ben Quadraneros, because he's got 4 engines. So his name is Quadraneros because quad, 4, funny, right?
Yes.
But and then you see like the danger of like, the link between his engines goes away and the engines just all fly around and blow up. Like it's terrifying. But then you get guys that have like the guy that has like the wheel cockpit that's like a vertical wheel that he sits in like the middle of. And so there's all this different designs and looks and interesting things that they're able to do with just the design of the pod racers themselves. And then you throw in the fact that there are all these unique different species, all these unique different aliens, and it's just super cool. It creates a very unique thing that, if it's one thing I don't think you can say about these prequels, there's a ton of imagination going into these movies and a ton of ideas that George Lucas is bringing to the table here. And maybe you don't like all of them, but something like pod racing really shows, I think, what his strength is as far as taking all these concepts, merging them into one thing, and putting it out there in a result that speaks for itself.
Something I was really impressed by with this movie is George Lucas's restraint to do the, hey, remember Star Wars thing. Like something you see all the time with like legacy sequels across any franchise. Just a legacy sequel thing is like anytime you see something that's a reference to the original, there's this like prestige around it and it slows down. It's like, look, we remembered this thing from the originals. And I know this is prequels, not sequels, but still, we're returning to Star Wars after 16 years. When Yoda shows up, he's just a guy on the council. Like if you had never seen those originals or didn't know he was a big deal, you wouldn't walk out of this movie thinking like, oh, that was a very important Jedi Master. He's just Yoda. Same with C-3PO or R2-D2. You compare those characters' first scenes in the sequel trilogy, and it's totally different. They're like, we've got to build this up. We've got to build up the Millennium Falcon coming back or this or that. And George Lucas does not do that. He doesn't put all this extra emphasis on characters we already know or know are going to be big deals. They're just characters in this story, in this movie. And same thing, like this movie doesn't look like the original trilogy. I mean, it looks like Star Wars, right? The color palette's totally different. A lot of the designs, like, we're just getting a lot of new stuff, whereas he could have just had the same speedsters and ships that we've always seen, but he's still just working in so many new ideas rather than resting on his laurels with what we already loved about Star Wars at the time. And I was just really struck by that because, again, you don't see that anymore. When a franchise gets revived or it's the first entry in a long time, they're, Andrew, you talk about the Twinkie in Afterlife all the time and how much it bugs you because
It
unnecessary,
bothers me. In this.
unnecessary callback.
It bothers me more than it should. I will admit that openly, that there are callbacks in Ghostbusters Afterlife that truly drive me insane, because like they find a crunch bar in the pockets of one of the suits, and I'm like, why? Why is that there? Why didn't any normal person eat the crunch bar? It's what you do with crunch bars. You don't leave them in the pocket of your thing. It melts. It gets all gross. No, I do like, because even The Mandalorian, I think, runs into this problem of and it's so odd, because I think when The Mandalorian started, it didn't have this problem. Like, it was still largely kind of trying to do its own thing. Like, obviously, there's Boba Fett imagery here. There's Boba Fett stuff at play. But we're still looking at a new character. We're exploring the stuff about Mandalore a little bit more, which we haven't before. But as the series has gone on, I think it definitely has started kind of leaning into the Memba Star Wars stuff, which, not inherently saying that's a bad thing, but obviously the Luke Skywalker reveal at the end of
it was both the best and worst thing that have happened for that show, I think. Because I'll admit, I popped off. But it's
huge pop,
yeah.
huge. For me, it was a cheap pop. It's like all these fans, all these big fans here on Tatooine. But
season 1 was praised for being a new corner of the Star Wars universe. We're not talking Skywalkers and Palpatines or main storyline. Like, this is what else has happened in this universe.
And now
I think that's what people loved about it. And then it merges to just
now it's Ahsoka, and now it's Boba Fett, and now it's Luke Skywalker, and there's a big moment.
Have we talked about the end of season 2 on this podcast? I don't know if it's come up before, but it drives me nuts. Because here's the thing. Yeah, you pop off and you see Luke Skywalker. That's great. I get it. But you don't need Luke Skywalker to be the hero at the climax of the season. Just seeing him is enough. The Mandalorian just got the Darksaber. He just got this awesome weapon that's been teased. He's in possession of it. And then he gets locked in a room so Luke Skywalker can take out all the bad guys. You just got this weapon. Use it. I want to see the hero I'm watching be the hero of his own show. And then after he defeats those robots, he can take Grogu to see Luke Skywalker. Then boom, we see Luke Skywalker. We still get that moment. Nothing is lost. Why does Luke need to be the one to take out the droids when he's got to be a faceless Luke, because it's not Mark Hamill, so we can't show his face. So it's just this cloaked figure taking them. I know, but not during the fight. During the fight, he's just a cloaked figure, right? So and then it's exactly like it would have been so much cooler for the Mandalorian to use the Darksaber to take out those robots. Why they sacrificed the natural progression of that story to give us the cheap pop of Luke Skywalker.
I will put it this way: if you were gonna have Luke show up and save the day, don't do the Darksaber stuff. If you leave it so that there's genuinely no option for our characters and someone needs to save them. Don't go to all the trouble of using the Darksaber, having the Darksaber, going through this complicated process of giving it to him, and then have someone else. Don't build in the solution to the problem and then use a different answer that isn't needed because you already have the answer. I will say that. I like I said, it's the best and worst thing about because it definitely signified, I think, a change in The Mandalorian to me, where now suddenly it's very much leaning into all of the, Ahsoka spins out of The Mandalorian. I know she's this existing character. Boba Fett, obviously, so all of these classic Star Wars things now have now shown up in The Mandalorian and have spun out into this thing, and now we're getting a full-on movie. It's going to be, I guess they're going to finish this all in a movie, which we'll see how that works. I don't know that there's ever been a movie that was the culmination of a bunch of television shows, but we'll see how that goes. But there's a big moment, I think. Is this season 2 where he gets the Naboo fighter starship? But I don't remember where that was. But that's a big moment where they find him a spaceship and it's a Naboo starfighter, and you're supposed to be hey, we know that thing. That's from that other movie, and it's cool. Could just given him anything. You didn't have to give him that.
Star Wars Episode 1.
Pod racing is cool, guys.
Pod racing is very cool. They should do. Have they ever used it again in anything? Have they ever has there been a pod racing scene in anything since this?
I don't think so. I know
it feels like a waste.
Yeah.
You just talk about how we like them to invent new things rather than reference pre-established stuff, and now you're saying it's a waste that they haven't done. I think it's cool that it's only in this movie. I think it makes it special.
You can reuse something. It doesn't mean whatever. But like, if you're gonna be like, you don't need to make it a focus either. You can literally be on Malastare or whatever, and it's like, oh, pod racing is a thing here.
At the Star Wars theme park, Galaxy's Edge in Disney World, they have a restaurant called Ronto Roasters. And it looks like in the center, like there is a droid chef who's cooking on like a big hibachi type grill, but it is being heated from above by a pod race engine that's like upside down and like
that's cool.
Powering up and like blowing hot air down. So it's pretty cool, like world building within the Disney park to see that in person. But in terms of actual racing, yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, I love the racing scene. I love the announcer as well. Who I know half of it is voiced by Greg Proops. I can't remember who voices the other half, but
Scott Capurro.
Scott Capurro, but just there's a couple of lines in there like, I don't care what universe you're from, that's gotta hurt. Like just very classic like sports announcing in Star Wars, which is very funny to me.
Yeah. We get to see Jabba the Hutt show up again without much pomp and circumstance. Just, he's there with his bodyguard that's got the weird head thing that twirls around his neck. Cool to see
Bib Fortuna. Yeah.
Bib Fortuna.
Bib Fortuna?
That's his name, Bib Fortuna.
Bib Fortuna. You serious? It's like if you order like tuna at a restaurant, like, sir, would you like a bib for tuna? Oh, yes, I would. I'm quite messy when I eat tuna.
Tuna is a very messy food. Fortuna is one word, to be fair. I do like you mentioned the kind of intercuts between the final sequences. I do like that a lot too. So the other things that are happening, you've obviously got the Gungan fight against the droid army, cross-cut with the infiltration of the Queen and her posse to kidnap the Viceroy, and then obviously the lightsaber fight intercut with that. Like I said, these all ebb and flow together really well. Like obviously when things are looking bad, they're looking bad for everybody at once. It looks like things may be going the wrong way. But then obviously our heroes overcome and they are able to succeed. Anakin accidentally disables the droid army, which, hey, worked out for all of us. But that obviously saves the people on the planet. It blows up the Trade Federation stuff in the sky, which basically strands the Viceroy on the planet, and he has to do what... I feel wrong calling the Nubians, but I actually think that's the technical term.
That is, because Watto refers to it as a Nubian T-14 hyperdrive. So.
I do not want to call them that. The people of Naboo,
especially when they have a 14-year-old queen.
And also we've already
that's
got
not the thing about
some troubling racial things with the Gungans, and let's not talk about the troubling issues with Watto himself. Best to move forward. Anyway, the people of anyway. This means the Viceroy is basically stranded, and the people of Naboo basically now have the upper hand. This is then followed up on by showing that Palpatine, now Chancellor Palpatine, I believe is the title he gets by the end of it, the Supreme Chancellor. You gotta wonder if that's going to come back to factor in later. But
now he has olives and onions.
And peppers. But only green peppers, not those red ones.
Thank you for not laughing at that joke. It wasn't very good, but I had.
No. But anyway,
because the Supreme Pizza has the extra toppings. That's the joke.
Oh, okay. I've been sitting here trying to figure out what we're doing.
Anyway, so these all crescendo together really well. Obviously, like I said, the droid army is incapacitated. They kidnap the Viceroy, or rather, they engage the Viceroy in aggressive treaty talks. And then ultimately, Obi-Wan bisects Darth Maul and sends him falling down a tube, which he's going to be real mad about for a really long time. So all this is really cool. It's cut back and forth. Again, you're seeing Natalie Portman like front and center with the action. This is not a damsel in distress. This is someone who is taking charge, and I think it comes off really cool. She's calm under pressure. There's one moment where I always think it's really strange, where like they're outside, they like sneak out a window to get around something, and they come up to another window, and it like hyper focuses on her holding up this giant blaster forward, and then cuts inside, and all she does is shoot out the window. It just seems like such an odd focus on a heavy moment just to her to blow out the window. But all this is cool. All of this works together really well. The score is switching back and forth between different things. And as a climax of this movie, it's very exciting. It's very cool. There's tons of great visuals. Obviously, the droid army is definitely giving us like proto-stormtrooper vibes is what they are.
Dude, I love the droid army. Again,
Yeah.
I love that he didn't use stormtroopers again, but I love their designs. I love the battle ones that like roll. I love their dumb little voices. I love Roger Roger.
Roger.
I love I love when Qui-Gon is trying to
They're trying to get
their
on the
way
cruiser,
back onto
yeah.
Coruscant, and the droid guy is like, Coruscant, that doesn't compute. You're under arrest. Like,
Yeah,
I love a robot
I
saying.
love that they use
like,
yeah.
yeah, trying to
robot getting-
process. Like,
The robot getting confused, basically.
I love those little guys. They're adorable, but also fun to watch them get blown up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're definitely having some fun with that.
I love the design of Naboo. Like oftentimes if you talk about like which planet in Star Wars would you want to live in, Naboo is like such an easy pick, even though the most evil man in the galaxy comes from there. But I feel like a lot of times when we think about planets in Star Wars, we think about one specific location on that planet. When you think
One
about Tatooine,
biome.
you think about Mos Eisley. When you think about Coruscant, you just think, and I mean, to be fair, Coruscant is one big city.
I love that line.
What do you-
The entire planet is a city
Yeah.
because like we're used to like the ice planet, the lava planet,
yeah.
the city planet. Like only
But-
cities grow on this planet.
Right. And Naboo, though, feels really like thought out. It's got, this major metropolitan area in Theed, but then it also has these underwater
Yeah.
cities, and then it has these rolling fields and plateaus. Amidala's got a lake house she's going to take Anakin to in episode 2 for some rolling around in the hay. But it's just like it's a really well thought out location, and I enjoy those scenes underwater in Odo Gunga. When Jar Jar is being confronted by Boss Nass for his transgressions. Some of the dialogue there is a little awkward when he says, rather die here than in the core. Egads, what's me saying? Like, it's very awkwardly delivered, but Boss Nass, fantastic. And it also gives us a great opportunity to see the Jedi mind trick work in full force there with him. And then we get the opposite of that when they go travel to Tatooine. We talked a little bit about Watto. We won't get too into the weeds on Watto. But seeing that, there's creatures out here in the universe where mind trick doesn't work. You can't just like use that in any situation. I do love the droid designs though, and I wonder why like they didn't. Was it a manufacturing cost? Was it too expensive to keep making droids? Because it seems overall they're just as effective, if not more so, than stormtroopers. You avoid loss of human life. You don't have to feed droids. I mean, those the rolling the droidica destroyer droids with the mini force fields probably effective in 98% of fights unless there's a Jedi around. Like, I don't understand why the Emperor was
Maybe
so excited to move on. I know that's coming in a later film, but why?
Maybe it's a
move on from the
renewable
droids?
resource thing, like creating organic matter is limitless. Versus
Empire's very
droids
green.
require-
Yeah,
Well, maybe there's only so much metal you have to make these things. I don't know.
it's true. They got to use it on their giant planet.
You can't
spaceships.
You can't deny what is the whole thing in Top Gun Maverick? Like you can't. There's a point at which the human interaction can't be replaced by a machine. I
think that's also the message of Sully. So
it is. So I don't, and obviously with the clones, they were able to like specifically bioengineer them to do a specific thing and act in a certain way and function. But also you could present that as like, I don't know, because they're created in secret. Like, I guess, like, it's weird that they're created in secret, but then the Republic or the Empire ends up just using them. So, like, it's a very... unfortunately, there's no way...
Either
to
way,
episode 2.
it doesn't exist it doesn't exist in this movie, so we don't need
Yeah.
to spend too much time on it. And I know we've been here a long time. We're wrapping up soon. I just want to make sure we spent a lot of time on the two biggest scenes of this movie, rightfully so. They're awesome. Want to make sure we get plenty of shout outs to some other stuff too that maybe doesn't always get talked about. The underwater city looks awesome. I love the design. I love the look of it. Everything seems to be based on like bubbles. Everything's rounded. Everything's lit up from within. Super
Shout
cool
out
design,
to
super
the
cool idea.
general that greets them when they get there too, and then fights with Jar Jar in that final scene. He just seems like such a good dude. Like
Yeah, like
He's
everyone
just very
sees Jar
saddled
Jar
with
as
Jar Jar.
a screw up, but he is always willing to try to help him out, even if it almost kills him. Good shout out. I love, of course, escaping the underwater city. They go through they hit the dangerous path, and we get the wonderful line, "There's always a bigger fish," visualized with larger and larger fish. It's super cool.
I feel like in that scene too, it's not made super clear that when one of the fish bites the ship that it actually starts leaking. Like I don't know. Like it took me a while to realize like, oh, they need to get to the surface pretty quick here or their ship is just going to fill with water. Like their little ship that they're driving around.
I legit don't think I realized that, but that is a cool detail. I also want to shout out this. So we talk about, everyone loves the action scenes. Everyone, probably one of the biggest complaints about this movie is how much of it is about trade disputes and bureaucracy and long dialogue scenes that you might not find interesting. But a dramatic scene that I think works 1000%, and more kudos to Jake Lloyd for this, is when he's saying bye to his mom. Man, I'm talking about Jake Lloyd's performance, talking about how good he is at being a happy-go-lucky little boy, and that's most of his performance. But here, it is heartbreaking where he thinks he can say goodbye and walk away, has to go back and talk to her some more, and is trying to reconcile this feeling within him where like he knows he has to go, he knows this is best, but is it worth it if I can never see my mom again? Will I see her again? It's rough. Like I didn't have tears streaming down my face, but I was feeling it. And of course you've got to give credit to Jake Lloyd, as well as, we didn't talk about her and I got to pull up her name, Pernilla August, who plays Shmi Skywalker. Is that how you say it, right?
Skywalker, yes.
Playing Anakin's mother. Just a few scenes, just had that warm, motherly sort of feel, and absolutely kills it alongside Jake Lloyd in that goodbye scene.
Watching that scene, I definitely had a moment where I was getting a little verklempt. Not full on tears, but definitely getting a little verklempt. Had to come up with a topic for my cats to discuss amongst themselves, the whole nine.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, the performance is there. I think we talked earlier about how, there are certain child actors who can play at a higher maturity level because they are more mature, maybe emotionally, physically. But this is where I really think we benefit from Jake Lloyd being so young and still acting so young and kind of naive, that it really does feel like there's that childlike sense of loss and abandonment that he's going through there that I think is like super relatable for a lot of people probably that are taken from their parents for whatever reason or lose a parent. That is really touching. So I think that's a fantastic scene.
As a whole, I mean, the way this movie stood in my brain was honestly quite negative. I've already mentioned the machete order, and last time I sort of revisited this franchise as a whole. But rewatching this first movie, there's so many more highs than I remembered, so much more works than I remembered, great scenes, and I've got two kids that have not watched any Star Wars at all, I think. And so I know at one point, this will be a franchise we dive into as a family, and there might have been a time where I would have maybe done some Machete Order or only trilogy, kind of pieced it together. But if we're going to do the Skywalker saga, doing all 9 episodes, and especially, as a kid, they're going to come into this franchise with much less baggage than we have living through the receptions and everything. I think they're going to have no problem sort of seeing it as a whole and as a piece versus segmenting it so much as older fans do, because we're there when many of these release. But I overall had a pretty good time in this movie.
It's a blast. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun to be had here. I think it is getting its day in the sun. The prequels in general seem to be getting much more. The harshness seems to have softened in later years. You still get people that have to be that guy and are just like, just a reminder, guys, these are really bad. And I have no joy in my life and I hate everything. But it's there is the nostalgia, I think, that's developed for these. Obviously, being kids when this came out, there was an excitement. I mean, I saw this in theaters many times, as we talked about earlier. I can't deny the joy I felt watching this movie. And I think a lot of us would give anything to feel that kind of joy about anything now. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll echo what you guys are saying. I think these prequel films are not without their issues, but for me, especially this one being the first new Star Wars movie content really that we'd gotten in 16 years, being 11 years old, sitting down in that theater with my mom to watch it, like that's a lifetime memory for me. That's something I'm never going to forget. You know, a few years ago, I got to go down to the theme park in Florida and do the build your own lightsaber experience, which is like this way overpriced, absolute nostalgia grab that Disney is doing, where they can charge 15 people $200 each to go into a room and build a lightsaber. But it worked. It popped. Like I held that.
Wait,
thing
the
up in the
lightsaber
air.
worked? That's a pretty
It
good
works.
deal for $200.
I can go get it from the other room, but I've told my wife, like that's the closest I've ever felt to being, you know, that 11-year-old in the theater again, was like holding up that lightsaber and igniting it for the first time. Like Star Wars is just always going to have a special core memory place in my heart because of that time growing up with my mom watching those movies and seeing Phantom Menace in theaters with her on opening night is like a huge part of that. So that's just, yeah. I love Star Wars. Star Wars is fun. Just let it be fun.
Again, how dare you come onto the internet 2024 and completely centralized in this part at this time of year in this part of the country, completely localized to this podcast and talk about enjoying things. It's unbelievable. It really is kind of nuts that the discourse on Star Wars has become so I'll be tactful and say divisive, to where there feels like there is a group that just has to hate everything that comes out about it now because Disney ruined it. And I love this notion that like Disney somehow made Star Wars like less special is what I hear a lot. Like Disney's basically commodified it and turned it into just another thing. There's nothing special about Star Wars anymore. It's not unique. And for me, I'm like, Star Wars has always been this massive toyetic thing, and so it's kind of weird to me when people are like, you know, Star Wars was better when a major corporation didn't own it, as if Lucasfilm wasn't a giant company that definitely used it to make as much money as possible. But it's, yeah, you know, you talk about those memories being a kid, the things you felt, all of that, and yeah, if someone tells you that this movie is one of their favorites and they give you all these reasons for it, and your first thought is I have to tell this person they're wrong, you're everything that's wrong with the world. So clean it up.
Brian, thanks again so much for being here.
Yes, thank you very much.
Draft
Thank you
Punks,
for having me.
Again, big fan of the podcast. I understand new episodes are not currently coming out, but the archive is still there, and I recommend revisiting those episodes. In particular, I mean, I really love anytime it's centered around music or song drafts. I think we've talked a bit about your podcast, but I don't know if you really told the people the premise. So why don't you tell people what Draft Punks is all about?
Yeah, sure. So when we were releasing episodes, it's always me and my buddy Travis, and Preston had joined us towards the end of the run, and we'd have a special guest on, and we would pick a topic or a category that was usually unique to that guest, that they had some kind of interest in. And then we would do sort of a fantasy football style draft where we go back and forth picking our favorite things from that category. So we started first episode just to get the concept out there. I think we did MCU movies, which there are probably twice as many things we could pick now as opposed to what we were picking back then. But like you said, we cover everything. We do music, we do TV, we do movies, we do sports, we do birds in one episode. That was a fun one. Big Bird for the win. Larry Bird, close second. But yeah.
That's amazing. That's perfect.
Yeah. That one was really fun because we had our guest on as a buddy of ours, Adam, and we told him we were playing it totally straight, that we were picking like actual birds. I think he knew something was up, but he played along with the bit pretty well. And so he picked 5 real birds, and then we picked anything but real birds. So that was a very fun episode. But yeah, who knows? Hopefully we'll be able to return to it someday, maybe when our kids are a little bit older and we have a little bit more free time to record. But right now, it's just life's gotten super busy for all of us. So, but if people are interested, if you're on the Best of the Rest Discord, I'd recommend coming over and joining our Discord too. We have a lot of fun discussion there as well. But I appreciate you guys having me on. This was super fun. I love to talk about Star Wars. I'm kind of, Marge Simpson when it comes to Star Wars. I just think they're neat.
Maybe one day we will all be able to say somehow Jaff Punks returned and be happy about it. But you got a great community over there. We're going to have a link in the show notes so people will easily be able to find where to join you guys. Again, thank you for being on here. Your positivity and enthusiasm was a perfect way to kick off Star Wars prequel month as we continue through this franchise. Thanks. Star Wars. We're back in it, Andrew. This is, I don't know, we'll see how the month goes. I know it's a longer than usual episode, but it's hard to talk about this franchise, any corner of this franchise, without sprawling into other parts of it, because it's so massive and special to so many people, and dare I say, important in many ways. It is. We joke about the internet and the fandom, but it is fun to talk about. I guess with the right people, with the right audience, as we tend to have on our show. It's great having Brian here, who has such enthusiasm for it. But man, I'm in the Star Wars mood. I'm in the zone. It's time to revisit the rest of this prequel trilogy, and so far, so good. I have seen episodes 2 and 3. And then we're ending the month with Solo, which I have not seen. So this I don't know. We got a lot of road ahead of us.
We do. A whole lot of Star Wars to go. I saw all these movies. I don't revisit them too often. I remember I did a full watch of the Machete Order once, probably 7 or 8 years ago, but we included episode 1 because we're not haters like you are. But it's...
we've been talking Machete Order the whole episode. I don't know if we ever said what it is, but the idea is you watch episode 4 and 5. Episode 5 ends with the reveal that Darth Vader is Luke's father. Sorry, spoilers. And then you flash back to see Vader's origin or Anakin's origin, and then end with episode 6 as a conclusion. Of course, we have sequels now, so it would continue, but it's existed. The idea has existed since before then, but it's just a way to watch the whole franchise with preserving the surprise reveal of Vader being Luke's father. And like I said, the version that I did it with cuts out episode 1 because you quote unquote don't need it for the overall story. But either way, is that an accurate summation?
Yeah, it also adds in the who Sidious is. That's the other thing you find out through the flashback. Like you get the implication of who the Emperor is in episode 5, and then episode 5 ends with "No, I am your father," and then you flash back, and you get to find out who the both of them are, basically top to bottom. I guess because I remember hearing it preserved the Palpatine is Sidious thing, but like I said, I'm sketchy on whether that's a secret, but also it's never revealed in any of the original films that that's who he is. That Palpatine was this previous life he had. So you do get to see how Palpatine becomes the Emperor, but that's not a twist that's being preserved by watching it in this order necessarily. But you just get to find out how Vader and the Emperor end up, where they're at. You get to find out, where the Death Star comes from, stuff like that. So that's the big thing, is you get to watch all 6 without having the twist of Vader being his father spoiled.
Plenty more Star Wars to come, but for now, it is time for our question of the week. And if you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do that by joining our Discord server. If you have not done so already, what are you waiting for? There's a link right there in the show notes. Come and join us. It's a good time, and you can leave your cues, just like Oculus Neko has done. Very interesting question this week, Andrew. They say, I saw 2 silent films blended with music over the past year. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Am I saying that right, Andrew?
Mm-hmm. It's in the ballpark.
And Nosferatu. Now, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari had Invincible SARS music, and Nosferatu, the showing they saw, had Radiohead. The question is, if you could add music to a silent film, which album would you choose to blend it with to make an epic vintage/modern mashup cinematic experience? Now, first off, I've heard of Nosferatu being played with like a live score, orchestra, messing with the music. I've never heard of Radiohead. That sounds very cool. And then the cabinet, I'll just quit saying the full name. Yeah, I've not heard of that. Modern music with a silent film. I like this idea a lot. I can't say anything springs to mind as far as what I would mash up, but Andrew, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I actually asked for this because I mentioned I went to a thing called Music Box of Horrors a couple weeks ago. I think it was actually just last week, but it was a 24-hour film festival where they were showing various different horror films. But one of the ones they showed was a silent film called Suspense. It is a what year was that? It was a 1913 silent film that is used. They called it kind of a proto-slasher, where basically the plot of the movie is this servant leaves a new mother with only a handwritten letter of notice, leaves her key under the doormat, and leaves. They call him the tramp in the credits, but just a vagrant passerby, whatever, sees the maid leaving and starts sniffing up around the house. The mother sees this person and kind of runs upstairs, calls her husband, locks herself in a room. The husband has this very oddly comedic chase home where he steals somebody's car, and the cops start chasing after him while he's running back to his house, because the vagrant then gets into the house, grabs a knife, is kind of stalking the wife up to the room, breaks in through the door, and is about to do something when the husband gets back inside and is able to fight him off. And the cops, literally, the guy realizes why he stole his car and like pats him on the back like it's okay. Like, it's very strange. But they had a local musician named Max McGathy do a live score for this 13-minute film. I don't actually know how long it is. 10 minutes. And he mentioned something that stuck in my brain, is that when he thought about a film like this and what he was thinking of John Carpenter. And how would John Carpenter score a film from the 1910s, and 1913? And so he kind of envisioned the piano, which is something that John Carpenter would do a lot, but instead of synth, he used cello. So he had cello instead of kind of like the driving synth lines that John Carpenter would use. And it worked extremely well. I'm kind of sad that I don't know that it was recorded / preserved in any way. So that might have been the only time I ever get to hear this, which is another very weird thing for me to compartmentalize in my brain. To see something that only the group of us saw in that room and that nobody will ever see again. But it did get me thinking about silent films, and John Carpenter is a name that just kept coming to mind as far as somebody that I think could take a movie like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Nosferatu and add this very creepy, evocative, emotional score to it that I think would work really well. You think about stuff like Halloween or Christine or any of those kind of driving synths, Escape from New York, whatever. He can create mood in those through those scores, through the choices he makes. Everything, it all works. And so I think there's some films that would definitely sound really cool with his added music. I know the band Goblin also does a lot of score soundtracks. They tend to do them on movies that already have sound. Like they did the soundtrack for like Suspiria. They've also done versions of stuff for the European release of Dawn of the Dead called Zombie. I think they're another band that would be interesting to potentially add their music to something like. I think they'd actually be really good for Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And then I would say John Carpenter could do Nosferatu and probably do that really, really well. But that's oddly something that's been on my mind ever, as having watched like a live score to a silent film, which that is actually not uncommon. Having an audience see a accompaniment of a silent film, live music. Sometimes it's just a piano, sometimes it's just an organ, because that's actually what would happen in like the golden age of cinema. Is you'd get sent a silent film with a stack of sheet music, And that sheet music was then given to a piano player, an organ player, or whoever, and they played along with this music, with this film as it played. There was nobody traveled. There was no recordings. I mean, you think about it, recorded music is a fairly recent innovation in the world of anything. Like recorded music is maybe from a mainstream perspective less than 100 years old. It used to be that if you wanted to hear live music, you, like an orchestra, that was kind of a class thing where you had to be in a pretty good position to do that. So for the longest time, that was actually what they did for popular music, is they'd release the sheet music, and then you were basically went home and played it yourself on your piano. So that was how movies were seen for a long time, is you'd get sent a reel of film, and then you'd get sent a score to play the music. At some point, people realized that you could just write new music to these things, because in a lot of cases, some of these silent films, the music wasn't preserved. So nobody knows what the intended music was. And so people would go back and do their own versions. Metropolis is another movie that's had a bunch of different scores, including one by Giorgio Moroder, who used a bunch of Queen music when he redid his version of Metropolis. But yeah, John Carpenter is kind of the name that sticks in my head, and something like Nosferatu, I think, would be really interesting to hear what he could do with that.
Well, that's such a good answer that I'm not going to be able to top. That makes a lot of sense to me, and seems like something he would genuinely be interested in doing. Andrew, you got to get in touch with this guy and pitch this idea, because I think that is awesome. Like, I could, the way, like, Riff Tracks now releases their audio commentary, I guess, and then you play it with the movie. I could see a John Carpenter doing that. Like, here's my score for this, for that, for that. Or going to screenings and hearing it play. That's cool. I think he definitely would have a mind for it. My struggle with this is I'm not super familiar with a lot of silent films. I think this idea works really well with like a mystery or horror or genre picture, because those are so much about mood and atmosphere. Most of the silent films I've watched a lot of like Buster Keaton. I like a lot of like the comedies. I don't know what modern musician would like set a comedic tone, or just the right slide whistle for the pratfall or whatever. Like, yeah. I don't know who does that. Then Weird Al. What if Weird Al made some music for the Battling Butler? I think is the most recent Buster Keaton that I watched. I thought it was fantastic, but I don't know. I don't know if you're really improving it with just someone else's take on like a comedic score. I don't know. I think horror makes a lot more sense, and John Carpenter is about the best I could think to do that. I'm trying to think. Let's see, like I know Mastodon. They do music for Jonah Hex, so they've got some experience with making some music for a score. Yeah, that'd be cool. Obviously Trent Reznor. It's like his whole
what he does
second
now.
Career now. Yeah, I'm sure he would have a lot
his
of cool
first
ideas.
career now.
Sure, I just meant like sequentially, like is his new career. It's just like but I'm just gonna ditto your answers. I think that's the best, but I do want to hear for some more people what combinations they would come up with, especially if you can get to Radiohead music for Nosferatu. That's if you can get really weird with it like that. I want to hear some cool mashups and ideas. We have a question of the week discussion channel right there in that Discord. So again, join the discussion, and join us next week for some more Star Wars as we dive into episode 2. And until then, please remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony, and thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. When the Galactic Trade Federation sets up a blockade around the planet of Naboo, the Galactic Federation sends Jedi Knight Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi to meet and reason with the Federation trade leader. But when the trade leaders are ordered by a mysterious Sith Lord to dispose of the Jedi warriors, they flee to the surface and rescue Queen Amidala from the surface civilization, as well as Jar Jar Binks from the planet's underwater civilization. After escaping from the planet and blockade, they stop on Tatooine in need of critical repairs to their ship. Qui-Gon meets a young Anakin Skywalker, who is both gifted with machines and metachlorians.
Chris,
The
I'm sorry.
microscopic-
Sorry,
think-
wait a second.
Andrew and I are
You're
really hung up on your pronunciation
It's-
of Qui-Gon.
It's Qui-Gon. It's not Qui-Gon.
What did I say, Qui?
Qui-Gon. No, this is not.
I knew that I would say it wrong.
I felt like if I left it go on any longer, people would really be questioning.
I thought you were
fandom,
just
so-
I thought you were just saying it once and it was going to
Well-
be fine and we were going to move on. But
What was
then you
that-
kept saying it.
What was that question you asked me before we started recording, Brian, about how big of a Star Wars fan I am?
Yeah. I
The-
said
the
on like the
biggest,
1 to
love
10 scale. Where are you? So we're at the Qui-Gon level of fandom.
Qui-Gon.
Okay.
Qui-Gon?
I'm saying that's about a 4.
Yeah.
Qui-Gon?
Qui-Gon.
Qui-Gon.
Yes. Yes.
Guys, I'm just looking at how it's
There's
spelled.
your.
It's
I mean,
very-
there's your post credits right there. You're good now.
Oh no! If it's embarrassing to me, I don't put it in post credits. on
Chris
the
right.
only-
Of course.
Chris only lets the post credits be embarrassing to me.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna start from the top. God, this is so. Qui-Gon.
Qui-Gon. Yes. As he is called in the movie by everybody.
I'm very bad with names.
That's
it's
true. You did
It's
ask me.
Obi-Wan, right? Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh my
I
god.
hate you. I hate you. This is the man who asked me how to pronounce Spengler during our Ghostbusters 2 episode, so he's
Oh,
clearly
no.
he's not dialed in at all. So
All right, we got to lock in here, Chris.
All right, Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon. God, this is gonna be tough. When the Galactic Trade Federation sets up a blockade around the planet of Naboo, the Galactic Federation sends Jedi Knight Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi to I just see you both like bowing your head in shame, just thinking about how I said it.